Bye, Josh.
Bye, Josh. Man, it's really weird that Josh just asked us to fire him out of this missile chamber while wearing an ape suit. What did he think? What did he plan on happening after that,
I don't know. He sure was in a hurry to get out of here, though. He said, I think anchor point is that way. Just fire in that direction. I'll be fine. I really wonder why he was in such a hurry to get out of here.
Attention. Now crossing into territory claimed by the Union of Progressive Peoples.
The UPP? Never heard of them.
When we were cleaning up that mess of, bodies and alien parts from when we were off ship, didn't some of those name tags say UPP on them?
Crap, I think you're right.
This is the UPP. You are in direct violation of our treaty with Weyland-Yutani. Evacuate our territory now, or we will be forced to board your vessel.
Oh, man, they must think we're still a military ship. They don't know that we're just a couple of dudes who's... Well, I guess we did steal a military ship.
We admittedly, yes, we did.
Yeah, but we're not military anymore. Hey, Kenny, are you sure we got all of that alien genetic material off the ship?
Of course we did. I mean, I think we did. Fuck. I hope we did. Uh-oh.
Cooler bot detects perspiration. Time to replenish your fluids.
Welcome to Crew Expendable. I am polycarbon fabricator Hallstrom.
And I am guy who tells the same story 4 different times in a row, or Rohrbacher.
And we are just a couple of acid-burned space marines who haven't been debriefed about the alien universe yet. That works, right? That kind of works.
I love it. It's flawless. I wouldn't change a moment.
For some reason, the Hicks line I remember from this the most is, I think mostly from the audio drama, was him just being like, why haven't I been debriefed yet?
Oh yeah, there's a period where to 3 different people he's like, why haven't I been debriefed? And I'm like, that is not the important part of what's going on, dude. Relax.
Yeah, man. It's finally time, Kenny. This is one of the things I was looking forward to talking about the most on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Of all of the attempts at writing an Alien 3, all of the unproduced screenplays of Alien 3, this is probably the most well-known one, right?
I would agree to that, yeah.
In fact, it's the only one that I can name. There are quite a few other ones out there, but this is the only one that I had ever heard about.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's also Eric Red did one. Vincent Ward has done one, but this is the William Gibson Alien 3 script.
It sure is.
William Gibson, of course, super famous science fiction author. I believe coined the term, or is attributed with coining the term cyberpunk.
He didn't invent the genre, but he wrote the novel that kind of solidified what cyberpunk as a concept was, as far as now when you hear the word and think of all of these things, he's the one that put all of those things together into one place, kind of.
And that novel, of course, is Neuromancer, a book that I have attempted to read no less than 3 times, but haven't actually followed through with yet.
I have never even attempted to read it. So.
Okay. Have you read any Gibson aside from this Alien 3 thing?
I don't think so, but that's just me thinking off the top of my head. Okay. In order to know for sure, I'd have to look at a list of his books and check, but none are coming to mind right now.
Gotcha.
So probably not.
Are you a big sci-fi reader?
I mean, reader, not really.
Sure.
When I read novels, I generally, this may come as a surprise to you, but I generally just read horror novels.
What? That doesn't check out. That doesn't track at all, dude.
Not even a slight bit, no.
And of course, when I read novels, I mostly read Sabrina the Teenage Witch comics from the 60s.
That classic thing, novel, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's graphic novels, right? Listen, I know I haven't read any Gibson. Look, I've read a lot of Philip K. Dick, though, so there's a lot of books out there, people. All right. And
there sure are. There's a whole shitload of books out there.
I went through a year where I read nothing but Philip K. Dick books. This isn't an episode about PKD, but Philip K. Dick does have my favorite all-time book title ever. which is Flow My Tears, the policeman said. just a banger of a fucking title, and a really good weird book as well. So, like, I don't want any of the sci-fi heads out there to be like, this guy hasn't read Neuromancer. Leave me alone. All right, I read Ubik, okay?
Yeah, I'm the one that hasn't read Neuromancer. That's me.
Yeah. Kenny just he's read every Goosebumps book. He's read every Fear Street novel, right?
I've read every Animorphs.
You read all of the Animorphs. So I guess that's sci-fi, right?
It absolutely is, baby.
That counts. But Gibson is a blind spot for me, and this is the first work of his that I've read, and I primarily read adaptations of his screenplay versus his actual screenplay. So, like, I still don't feel comfortable saying I've read any Gibson. But you went in depth. You read the man's words that he typed up directly.
I sure the hell did. Just so listeners are clear on this, William Gibson wrote 2 different drafts of a screenplay for Alien 3.
Yes.
Both of those drafts have been adapted into, both of those drafts have been adapted. I was going to say into 2 things each, but no. The first draft has been adapted into a novelization.
Sure.
And for this episode, I read the novelization and the original script the novel is based off of.
Yeah.
And then for the second draft of the script, they made a audio drama and a 5-issue comic book, both of which I listened to / read respectively.
There you go. Yes, the novelization adaptation is written by Pat Cadigan. The comic series, the 5-issue comic series, was written by Johnnie Christmas and illustrated by Johnnie Christmas, with colors by Tamara Bonvillain and letters by Nate Picos. The audio drama was directed by Dirk Maggs, same guy who did Out of the Shadows, River of Pain, and Sea of Sorrows, and stars Michael Biehn as Corporal Hicks and Lance Henriksen as Bishop.
It sure does.
Yes, and they haven't aged a day, let me tell you. That's a mean thing to say. Of course they're getting older, but yeah, it was really cool, honestly. My favorite part about the audio drama was just the fact that they were voicing their characters, even though it's 2019, I think, and this screenplay was written in 1979, so like 30 years later, like 30 years after Aliens, they're reprising their roles for the audio drama.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, let's pretend the math is right. That's pretty cool. So I've listened to this audio drama before, and I've read this comic before, and so for this go around, I also just sort of listened to the audio drama a couple of times at work because it's very short. It's only like 2.5 hours or something.
Less than that, it's like 2:10, I think.
Sure, and then I read the comic book again. So I have only sort of skimmed the first draft screenplay, as I was just telling you before we hit record. So I'm going to be leaning on you a little bit to highlight, maybe save like the major, because my understanding is the storyline is essentially the same, right?
That is correct. Over all 4 iterations of the thing we're talking about on this episode, the general, like the gist of the storyline is basically identical over all 4 of them. Yes. Right.
So I maybe we should just stick to making this main conversation about the version 2, the second draft, because that's the one we've both read, and then you can dive into some of the differences at the end. Does that sound like a good idea?
Works for me.
Okay. Yeah, so let's get into what this thing is all about. The first thing I want to point out is that the audio drama opens with a very lengthy recap from Bishop's point of view of the events of Aliens.
It sure does.
It's got him like talking about it's got like the mess hall scene where Ripley freaks out because he's a synthetic, the whole end of the film where Ripley's gone back in to save Newt and he's trying to hold the ship. We do get the scene in there where Hicks tells Ripley that his name is Dwayne, and she responds that her name is Ellen, something that was cut from the theatrical version but added in for the special edition, right? The name exchange scene there. So they really want us to go into this knowing the main characters' names. And from there, we sort of pick up, again, in the audio drama, there's this whole opening narration from Bishop where he is aware that something is going on with him as he's in like hypersleep or shut down in the cryopod, right?
Correct.
And we'll circle back to that when we get there. But the main story opens with The Nostromo sort of being rerouted from Gateway Station to, not the Nostromo, holy fuck, the Sulaco, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ. The story kind of opens up with the Sulaco being rerouted from Gateway Station to a different Weyland-Yutani sort of way station called Anchor Point.
Yeah, it's on its way, and it's like while it's going to Anchor Point, it accidentally passes through like a little pointer edge of UPP space while it's on its way to Anchor Point. Yeah.
Yes. Now, you said accidentally. We do learn that it wasn't really accidentally, right? We learned that sort of it was kind of mandated by Weyland-Yutani that the ship go to Anchor Point instead, because that's where they have
correct, yes.
their genetic like experiment labs and stuff.
Indeed.
So by way of this quote unquote navigational error, they pass through UPP. You wouldn't call it airspace, right? Because there's no air in space. Would you call it?
I mean, it's just it would be UPP like territory, I guess.
UPP space. UPP airless space.
Well, I mean, I guess you could just call it UPP space.
Right. Yeah. So they travel through UPP space, which immediately alerts the UPP, the Union of Progressive Peoples, that there's a fucking military ship coming through their space in violation of a treaty they have with Weyland-Yutani. It seems specifically they have a treaty they have with Weyland-Yutani, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess Weyland-Yutani sort of runs everything at this point.
I mean, I believe they are the people that run Anchor Point, so it would make sense.
Yes. So UPP ship goes to intercept the Sulaco and board it. Should we talk a little bit about the Union of Progressive Peoples? I know we touched on them a little bit in our Aliens Infestation episode.
I do the same thing all the time. Don't worry about it.
They were invented for this, right?
They sure were.
They have been added to like main universe, like extended universe canon, which this isn't a part of, right? But they've turned up in other things recently. This is where they came from, and basically are they just like space communists, right?
I mean, yeah. That's what they are. They're like 80s space commies. That's exactly what they are. Yes.
Yeah, but I don't get the impression that they're being sort of portrayed as like the big bad in this. They're just a communist like party that's out there that is not in with the capitalists. And like honestly, who can blame them, right? Like this is an entire series about mega corporations abusing their power.
Yeah, pretty much. They're basically like depicted as every time a character hears about the UPP, they're always like, rolls eyes, these fucking guys.
Right,
But they're not really like the antagonists of the story or anything. They're just another party out there that the like main characters just have like a societal dislike of, but they're not really like actively story antagonists or anything.
Right. They're at some kind of war with the corporations, with the mega corporations. And like, honestly, you can't blame them. Weyland-Yutani has done nothing good for anyone in the alien universe. They just have all the money. So, and control everything. So like, I got to say right here, like I'm on the side of the UPP, both in this and in real life. We'll check in with the UPP in future things. Like I think that what do they appear in? We'll also see them in Aliens into Charybdis, and we'll probably talk about them. Oh, they get mentioned in Fireteam. I knew that, but we'll probably talk about them some more in like if we're doing like the role playing game stuff. I'm sure we'll run into some UPP things in there. That being the first official appearance of the UPP outside of this. So this UPP ship with 3 people jumps boards the Sulaco, and the only name I remember is the captain, Captain Kurtz, right? Which is just I don't know if it's a direct reference to Heart of Darkness, but I think based on what happens to him, it must be.
I mean, I guess I'm not saying that I'm not like I knew that there was a character named Kurtz in Heart of Darkness,
right?
But I was just like, it's just a name. Like, I mean, like, how should I put this? the stuff that happens to him didn't strike me as specifically a Heart of Darkness reference. I was just like, oh, this is what happens because you're in an alien story.
Sure, that's fair. As these UPP troops are sort of wandering through the Sulaco, they know they only have about 15 minutes because in 15 minutes, the Sulaco will be out of their airspace, and they will then be the ones in violation of a treaty. But like as it is, they're thinking it's like well within their rights to jump on board and check this stuff out. So they make their way to the cryo pod room where they discover, they see in the pods, right? They're like, oh, there's a young girl. They see everybody. They say there's like 3.5 people, and that half person is Bishop. And we see that out of Bishop's abdomen, there is an ovomorph growing.
Well, in the comic, there's an ovomorph growing. In the audio drama, he just has a face hugger hidden inside of his torso.
Is that how you read that? Because I heard him just talk about like the last remaining embryo, like the queen snuck an embryo into him when she sliced him in half, and it sort of grew into an ovomorph.
Yeah, the way I heard what happened in the audio drama is that it was a face hugger that was in him, not an actual ovomorph, because I don't remember any descriptions of it like opening up or them wondering what it was when they looked in. It's like they opened it, saw half of Bishop, went, what the hell? And then the face hugger got him. And there wasn't really any narration about there being like a big egg or whatever. So I took that to mean that in the audio drama, there wasn't one.
Okay. Yeah, you could be right. I've got the screenplay open here. The screenplay says, a dense pale mist flows out, spilling over the edges of the capsule, revealing the ovoid of a gray alien egg, rooted in the center of Bishop's synthetic entrails. The egg instantly ejaculates a face hugger. Gross, which strikes the leader's faceplate in a spray of acid.
In the first draft, it is very explicitly an egg.
Sure.
And in the comic, it is an egg. But like in the audio drama, they don't narrate it that way, which is why I have that written down in my notes.
Yeah, I thought he may have described it as something like the queen deposits her last remaining embryo or something, right? So yeah, you're right, it's a little unclear.
Then again though, as of this recording, I listened to the audio drama like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
So there's a lot of fine details about it that I'm not really remembering.
Right, that's fair. So this egg has been, we're just going to go with it being an egg. It's being an ovomorph. It expels a face hugger onto Captain Kurtz. Sorry, let me use the language that William Gibson uses. It ejaculates a face hugger onto Captain Kurtz.
Well, hold on. No, that's part of the script. That's first draft. We're talking about second draft, baby.
Okay.
It does not use that language in the second draft versions of the story.
Okay, it skeets a face hugger onto Captain Kurtz, who then like just sort of goes running out of the chamber with this thing on his face that's busted through with acid. The other people, they don't know what to do. He's sort of like running around firing wildly because they have these spacesuits with guns built into them, which is pretty rad.
Yeah.
And he like fires around a bunch of rounds as he's freaking out with this thing on his face, starts some fires, and the other two people just have to like get the fuck out of there, right? So they scoop up Bishop's remains and they run off. One of them doesn't want to leave Kurtz behind, and the other one is like, look, we only have 3 minutes before the ship leaves our sector, and Kurtz isn't going to clear quarantine anyway, so let's get the fuck out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to pause right here on that. This makes more sense to me as to how a facehugger could get on board the Sulaco versus just there's an egg magically on the Sulaco, like we got in the Alien 3 theatrical cut. This works a little better for me. The idea that the Queen could have implanted something when she tore Bishop apart, it's still a stretch, but at least,
I mean, like,
you know,
the thing of it is, to me though, is that it doesn't really work any better or any worse to me. It still feels like kind of a bullshit ass pull, because like the way they describe it in here is that like the Queen implanted some kind of genetic material in Bishop's torso that grew into an egg.
Right.
But it's like, when was the Queen able to do that? She shits out full-sized, fully grown, already fully formed eggs. Like,
yeah, I don't know.
when did she suddenly gain that ability?
Maybe, well, this was early enough in canon, right? And certainly Gibson wasn't checking in with what Verheiden and crew were doing the same year, right? But like this was early enough where there had only been 2 movies to reference, right? And I know that he makes a direct reference to the egg morphing scene in a later scene in the story. So perhaps his thinking was something along the lines of whatever this enzyme is that egg morphs people could have been dropped inside a synthetic. I don't know. But like if the ovomorph itself is part of the life cycle, if the ovomorph is a living creature that then gestates a facehugger inside it, that ovomorph egg would have to grow from something. So I guess it's not out of the realm of believability that she could have dropped like an ovomorph embryo inside of Bishop. It's still hazy, but it's interesting.
I mean,
it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I do think it's cool because like the one thing that I really do like about it is that it eliminates the one thing about later alien universe stories that's always kind of bugged me. I always thought it was kind of crap that they decided that xenomorphs don't care about synthetics.
Right.
Because then you have like Icarus situation where it's just like, just have synths do everything then.
Sure.
Because xenomorphs don't care about them.
Although clearly that didn't work.
in the world of this movie, xenomorphs still think synthetics are as much of a threat because like later on Bishop directly gets attacked by them, and like the xenomorph implanted this embryo in Bishop and all that. And it's like, I do like how in the world of this movie, xenomorphs aren't like, oh, I don't know what that thing is, I'm just going to completely ignore it. Like they're even though they're artificial, they're still considered like alive. And I do really like that about this story.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be real. How many times, like the only thing that really springs to mind is like, yes, Bishop was able to crawl through the pipe and call down the other dropship from the Sulaco in Aliens, right? He was able to do that. They didn't have anything about him being like, I'll do it. No, everything's going to leave me alone. The aliens aren't going to bother me because I'm a synthetic. Like that wasn't a topic of conversation, right? As far as I can think, the only time, and then of course we saw the xenomorphs just absolutely wrecking the synthetics in Outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in this, and the only time it doesn't happen, as far as I can think of, is in Alien Isolation, right? And that's specifically with the Working Joes.
Yeah, and that's also made way later in the timeline than this and Outbreak are. Those rules have already been established by the time Isolation comes out.
Yeah, so I don't know where that rule came from, but I'm not a big fan of that rule. And like even Icarus played with that idea because they were like, why are they attacking us? We're synthetics. But also like, I guess you guys are brandishing weapons and shit. So like maybe it's like a Predator thing where they have learned what like, guns are,
I don't remember exactly what episode we had this conversation in, but it's like, just because the xenomorphs don't go after synths because they don't consider them like a viable host or whatever, doesn't mean xenomorphs are like physically incapable of seeing synths. Right. If a synth has like a big axe over his head and is charging towards the xenomorph is still going to attack the synth, even though the synth can't like serve as a host.
They're not going to they're not just going to assume it's like a kitchen appliance, right?
Yeah. Like they see the thing coming at them and attacking them,
Right. Yeah. It's a weird issue, but whatever.
I don't know. I've never loved it, but I mean, it is what it is, I suppose. So
anyway, let's continue on with this story. We go from that scene on the Sulaco to Anchor Point Cluster, which is a Weyland-Yutani deep space station, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And someone named Tully is kind of blowing off like communications. And
there is someone from Op Center, I believe her name is Jackson. Jackson's okay. That's going down to Tully's quarters to wake him up because he's needed in ops.
Right, but he's busy.
He sure is busy.
He's busy getting busy.
That is correct. He is getting busy specifically with I believe it's Spence, I think.
Yes, Spencer, I think. Yes. Tully and Spencer, right? They're in bed together. This is like the first this would have been like the first direct sex scene we had in an Alien movie, right? And
that is correct.
It is funny that the theatrical version of Alien 3 also like actually has the one, right? And it's Ripley and Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah, Charles Dance.
Yeah,
I don't remember what his character's name is. Yeah,
it's Ripley and the bad guy from Last Action Hero.
That is correct.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tully and Spencer are fucking in his room, and Jackson interrupts him, and they're all like, "Oh, what the hell, man? Come on!" And Jackson's like, "Put your suit on, get out here. You're needed down to the Sulaco just pulled in, and you need to head the group that goes in there to check it out."
We need to comb. Yeah, there's some Weyland-Yutani suits are here, and they are requesting that we like comb the entire ship for biological material. And we meet the two Weyland-Yutani suits. There is a lady named so the guy is named Fox, right? And
correct.
The lady is, I'm bad with names. I'll be clear here. Wells. The comic book doesn't do a good enough job of reminding you of everybody's names. So Wells and Fox are our Weyland-Yutani suits, and they're talking to Rossetti, right? He's the guy sort of in charge of Anchor Point.
Correct. He's like a former Marine or whatever. And he's like kind of the governor, so to speak, of the space station.
He looks like my 8th grade science teacher, Mr. Capo, who used to play Doom in class while we were working on our lab projects. Looks exactly like Mr. Capo.
They really made Rossetti, like, they went out of their way to really make him look like a fucking real sad sack in this comic. It's weird.
Yeah, he's all kind of just schlubby and bald and bearded and looks like a middle school science teacher. And he's calling bullshit on them. He's like, "Look, I know you guys left Gateway Station before the Sulaco got rerouted here and went through their aerospace. I think you guys sent them here. I think you guys sent the Sulaco here to Anchor Point on purpose. I don't think this was a navigation malfunction." And they're like, "Yeah, fucking prove it. All right. We're with military sciences, and we're looking for some stuff that is probably on that ship that has to do with its mission to LV-426, and we're in charge." Classic Weyland-Yutani shit.
Mm-hmm.
So now we check in with the crew who's going on board.
Yep. On
board the Sulaco, and totally notices that one of the Weyland-Yutani guys is bringing in like a major weapon, right? An electron laser.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're expecting some kind of a threat, right? This is just a red flag that's going to come up later. So they all climb into the Sulaco, start making their way through. They find the bottom half of Bishop, which I thought was an interesting touch, because we should say the UPP also found the bottom half of Bishop. And I think in the audio drama, one of them has a line when they get into the cryo chamber where they're like, "Hey, I found the other half of that synthetic," which is just kind of nice. It's also
multiple people come across his legs, and they're all just like, "Huh, that's weird." Anyway, as I was saying,
somebody broke their robot. So I bought Colonial Marines recently on Steam, and I booted that game up just very briefly. I haven't played it ever before, and I just only played it a little bit this time. And the beginning of that, you're boarding the Sulaco, right? Much like you are in Infestation. And you can see Bishop's legs in the cargo bay. Same thing happens in that. It's funny how often Bishop's legs seems to be coming up, and I'm shocked they didn't do something about that in Isolation or in Infestation. That would have been really funny.
Yeah, it really did not seem like that part was important at all, yet multiple things have referenced it multiple times, and I was like, I don't get what everyone's preoccupation with finding Bishop's legs is. What?
Right. I don't know. It's just fun, though, I think. For this crew, it kind of makes sense. It doesn't really make sense. Like, it kind of makes sense that they can be like, "Oh, we know half a synthetic is missing," but they're going to learn that information from the people in the cryopods anyway, right?
Yeah.
So, speaking of, they make their way into the cryo freeze room, and they notice the damage from the UPP guy shooting his guns around. And Ripley is apparently awake inside her chamber, her cryopod, and is like banging to get out.
Yeah, they open it up and she comes out and she starts going sicko mode on everyone when
Yeah,
she
she does.
sees them like going towards Newt's pod. And this
Yes.
scene was interesting because of the 4 iterations of this story that I read,
Yes.
the comic is the only one that has that scene.
Yes.
The audio drama doesn't have it, and that moment doesn't happen in the first draft of the story.
I think
So
I
that is
think-
something they added for the comic.
is the idea that she got her pod got sort of damaged in the firing, like when the guy was shooting around, and that's why she's essentially in a coma for the rest of the story.
I think in the second draft, it gets damaged when they're shooting around.
Right.
And in the first draft, it gets damaged by the dude that gets face hugged and he's flailing around and accidentally smacks the console and breaks it.
Yeah. Okay.
But-
yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah, like that's the reason why I thought it was interesting, because like in all of the other ones, she's in cryo and then almost immediately goes from being in cryo to being in a coma.
Right.
But in this one, she fucking flips out and starts attacking people briefly. And I was like, whoa, okay, all right, sure, I guess.
Yeah, she frees herself from her pod. She attacks them, and they sedate her and take her back along with Newt and Hicks back to the anchor point. But they also find the body of Captain Kurtz and notice a wound. Something has burst through his armor. Right now, this is the very on the nose Heart of Darkness reference that I picked up on, which isn't a reference to the material inside so much as the alien bursting out of his chest. The alien is quite literally the Heart of Darkness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because see, okay, I will give you that, because that is definitely the kind of thing that William Gibson would do.
it's just a surface level reference. It works and it's funny. But I mean, like, it works with the themes of Heart of like Joseph Conrad's novel also, which, you know, he wrote Heart of Darkness, and obviously Sulaco and Nostromo are Conrad references as well. So Kurtz being named Kurtz, I'm sure, is a reference, is intended to be a reference to Joseph Conrad, and then the xenomorph being a black heart, right? Because it's embedded in your chest. I think it's a very fun little tidbit. That's all.
Also, I'm pretty sure that we did miss at this point in the story.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we've already seen insert moments of what the UPP did after unboarding the Sulaco.
Yes.
Specifically, they take the upper half of Bishop back to their space station, which is called Rodina Station.
Yes, the UPP Rodina.
They hook him up to a big computer, and they're trying to download, i.e. steal, as much information from him as they can, while he's still, like, quote unquote unconscious, like offline, you know?
And they steal quite a bit of information from him.
They do. They steal pretty much all of the information he had about specifically xenomorphs, but they also find a bit of that leftover genetic material that Bishop had in him at the beginning, and they're like, we're pretty sure that Weyland-Yutani was going to do something with this, so we'll figure out something to do with this ourselves.
Right.
And then it cuts back to what's happening on Anchor Point.
Yes. And the Weyland-Yutani employees have taken Kurtz's body, which, surprise, surprise, is also going to have some alien genetic material inside it.
Sure is.
We also meet Hicks, who woke up from cryosleep just fine and is immediately like, why haven't I been debriefed yet? Somebody debrief me, please. I got to be debriefed so fucking bad. Why isn't anyone debriefing me? I'm not sure who he's talking to in this. Is he talking to
I think it's
Spencer?
Spencer.
Yeah. And as he's like in the med lab, in quarantine in the med lab, Newt comes busting in. I guess I think this is in the audio drama where she like bit one of the guys who was like watching her and like ran away from him.
That is canonically how she got out. Like she's being led around by some Marine, but she starts panicking and she bites him on the side of the hand and he goes, "Youch!" And then she runs off into Hicks's med lab, and that's where she runs into the story.
Yeah, and she's like, "Where's Ripley? Let me see Ripley." And And Hicks is like, hey, we gotta let her see Ripley. I'm a badass tough guy. Like, don't fuck with me, essentially. Classic
great.
Hicks attitude.
I absolutely love this interaction because Newt's like, where's Ripley? And then Hicks looks at the Marine and goes, the lady asked you a question.
Yeah.
And the Marine's like, oh, I can't do the, and how like, and now I'm asking you the same question, bitch.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. It ruled. It was great. And then Spencer's like, all right, fine. Little lady, I'll take you to go see her. Everyone calm the fuck down. It's fine.
Where is Ripley and why haven't I been debriefed yet? Gotta say, immediately, like, happy to see these versions of the characters, right? Because this is not alcoholic, ostracized Hicks that we got in Outbreak, and it has not been stuck in poor mental health facility and drugged all the time Newt.
And it's also not a dead Newt or Hicks as it is in the movie. So.
And it's also not a dead Newt or Hicks as it is in the movie. So far, like, yeah. I'm on board with this version of these characters. Because it is just their versions from Aliens, right? Like,
yeah,
I think this is 4 years after Aliens. I think this takes place.
That is correct, but they'd been in cryo the whole time, so effectively no time had passed for them. So.
Yeah, but we do see Ripley, who is unconscious, in a coma, essentially. She's okay, she's stable, but she's not awake, and Newt's asking, Spencer's saying, like, sometimes people just need to, like, sleep to get over things. That's what she explains to Newt. And Newt is like, is she dreaming? It's better not to dream, right? Because I guess even though Aliens ended with it being okay to dream, I think Newt's been having some nightmares. Okay, so I was mistaken. Like, yes, they do have Kurtz in his body, but the real thing that they are pulling some alien genetic material off of is the lower half of Bishop. So I guess it is important that Bishop's legs were there. So on Anchor Point in the tissue culture lab, they are pulling off some alien gunk off of Bishop's bowels.
And this is important because Fox and Wells, they're here, specifically from Millie-Sci, as they continually point out to anyone, whether they ask or not.
Right.
And they have decided that the whole reason that they're here is they're going to take this material and they're going to take it to the tissue lab and then get them to start cloning whatever this is.
Whatever the fuck it is, yes. Interesting idea. This does sort of fall in line with the setup of however Bishop got this egg or embryo or whatever inside him. Like, this is making some pretty bold claims about xenomorph DNA, and that are strangely, like, similar to the pathogen in a lot of ways.
There is a scene later on where the workers, like the scientists in the tissue lab, which, by the way, are Tully and Spence. They give, like, a, what's the word? I was going to say procedure. That's not the word I was looking for. Demonstration.
Yes.
They give a demonstration to, I believe it's Hicks, Rossetti, Fox, and Wells later on, where they have, like, human DNA and then introduce the new DNA that they found and then watch in real time in, like, 3 seconds or less when the new DNA comes in and, like, takes over and changes the old, like, the human DNA. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the idea from the first 2 movies where xenomorphs have, like, a genetic ability to just kind of, like, modify their body, not like on the fly, but, like, while they're giving birth or whatever, their body will, like, make changes to better suit the environment they're in, which is how, like, the explanation for where runners came from and all that.
Right.
That idea is taken and, like, amped up to 11 and becomes, like, the premise around which the plot of this movie is based on.
Yes.
Like, the whole premise is all about, like, how xenomorphs have, like, this highly fast adaptable DNA that will enable them to basically, within just a couple of generations, i.e. like a week, they can just like fully change how their entire physiology like fully operates.
Yes, this idea also, like the 1992 the Kenner Aliens toys.
Yeah.
Also sort of took the same idea and ran with it. I'm forgetting the term for it.
Is it DNA reflex?
The DNA reflex idea of
thought so.
Yes, the DNA reflex idea of whatever their host is, they take on its properties. Again, like you said, to sort of make them better suited for whatever environment they wind up in. But yeah, this is sort of like it's reversing it. Like it is pathogen. Like it is like, no, this time we're going to use their DNA to mutate ours. So I guess maybe like the idea is like in an uncontrolled environment, like it's just loose genetic material being experimented on. It can get like wildly out of control very quickly versus sort of like
it just kind of like spontaneously adapts on the fly to the environment that it's in. Like how the DNA knows what the environment is, who knows? The movie never goes into that. But.
Right. I think it's just reading, like it just reads the DNA of whatever it comes in contact with and assumes that that is proper for the environment.
Yeah.
Again, that's like literally that's some versions of the pathogen that we've seen as a mutagen, right? Like the breaking down and reforming of the DNA into something new. You know, I don't know. It's interesting. Like I think that Prometheus was probably kind of inspired by this. I'm just gonna make that claim. I'm sure Damon Lindelof read this screenplay, right, and was like, "Hey, that's better than my ideas. I'm going to use them." Meanwhile, back still on Anchor Point here, my 8th grade science teacher, Mr. Capo, aka Rossetti, is getting a transmission from Weyland-Yutani, just all about like sort of scolding him for like checking in on Fox, like on the Weyland-Yutani suits, and Fox and Wells, and basically like telling him like no, they're in charge, and he just sort of like blows it off and ignores it. And eventually we are in the tissue culture lab where we sort of get that scene that you described where Tully and Spence are checking out the alien DNA and like impressed by what they see. But from there we cut to like they call it an eco module.
They sure do.
Which is like this, it's not an artificial like it's a natural environment built inside this space station with like actual trees and grass and stuff, you know, but like
it's designed to look kind of like a little forested area, and like the trees and stuff are real, but like the wind is fake, the sun is fake, but like the food and the trees and stuff are like, and the grass are like all real.
There's animals in here, and they're also
lemurs
alive.
Specifically.
Yes. I don't respect lemurs as actual animals, but sure. They've made several comments here about how Spence is an environmentalist, and so people have made some shots, but like, how does that working out for you working for a company like Weyland-Yutani? You know, it's like they're like calling her dedication to the environment into question because she's working for this evil corporation. I just thought that was fun. It was a nice touch. But in this eco module, we've got, I already forget which Weyland-Yutani person is which. Fox is the man, right?
Correct.
So this is Wells. Wells is with Newt, and Wells has been having a conversation with Newt about not telling anybody what she saw on LV-426, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Spence comes in, and Spence is like talking to Wells and is like, what's going on? How's she going to do? And Wells is like, well, we're going to send her back to Gateway. She's going to undergo therapy. And she has relatives. She has grandparents, and we're going to send her to live with her grandparents. And I am hoping to God that that is what they actually do. But because it's Weyland-Yutani, I don't know that I fully fucking believe this. Right? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
Like, it's, I'm a little, like, I want Newt to have this happy ending. Right? Like, she deserves it because all of the other versions that we've seen for her, like, things haven't gone well. Right. So I really want Newt to make it back to her grandparents on Earth. But because it's Weyland-Yutani facilitating all of this, I don't believe it's going to happen, unfortunately.
I mean, I'm not really able to speculate because they do successfully send her off to Gateway Station.
Sure.
And when she boards the ship and the ship leaves, we never see her again. So
Yeah.
since this entire story isn't canon anyway, who fucking knows? I mean, like, since this story never happened in the franchise, you can just say, oh yeah, she made it there just fine, because there's nothing to say that she didn't, you know?
Right. Yeah. I'm going to choose to believe that she made it home. I'm going to choose to believe that Wells is like the one honest person who like cares about children, but she's not really characterized that way in this.
She certainly isn't.
So, but maybe she's a softie underneath. I don't know. Anyway, we are going to cut over to what's going on the Rodina, where all of the UPP like muckety mucks are having a conversation about the stuff they found in Bishop's brain.
Mm-hmm.
They've got like everything. Like they know the face huggers, they know the chest bursters, the ovomorph, they know what the queen looks like, they know what the adult xenomorph like drone looks like. They have accessed all of this stuff from Bishop's memory banks. And they are talking about how they know, thanks to all this stuff, they can confirm that Kurtz became a host for one of these things. So they're going to fix up Bishop and return him to Weyland-Yutani and try to get them to give Kurtz back in exchange, right? And they're going to like pretend like they have no knowledge of the xenomorph or any of this stuff, because they don't think that anyone will be able to tell that they access Bishop's memory. Like he won't know that they access his memory, and they can't do anything to like overwrite or like erase his memory either because of like just the sophistication of his model. Is that pretty accurate?
The gist is basically that they'll be able to extract information from his memory banks. Yes. And he as in Bishop won't know, like will have no way of knowing whether they ever accessed his banks or not. So
right.
They can get all this information without like leaving behind any trace.
Yeah, no paper trail.
But they're like, oh yeah, since no one will know we're in here, they won't know that we got this information, making the absolutely like rookie Bush League mistake of believing that they wouldn't just assume they took it because they have no way of telling that they didn't, you know?
Yeah.
Because I phrased that weirdly. Let me rephrase that.
You're right.
When they access Bishop's memory, no one will be able to tell that they did, which means that there as well won't be any indications that they definitely didn't.
Right.
So Anchor Point's going to assume that they did because they have nothing saying otherwise.
Yeah,
you know?
But this is like,
my point is that's the mistake Rodina makes. They're like, oh, nobody will be able to tell, so we're just going to do it.
Sure.
Not realizing that because no one could tell, everyone assumes they will, not that they won't.
Well, I think they know that everyone's going to assume that they will or that they did, because this is like a Cold War situation, right? But all they're looking for is like, look, on paper, as far as this treaty we have, this, you know, between us and whoever, like as far as the treaty is concerned, we have done nothing wrong. We have not violated it. So like they may know that we did this, but they really can't do anything about it as long as we just deny that we did it. It's like a Cold War spy thing, right? Like I think it's interesting. I think it's fun. Because of course Weyland-Yutani is going to assume that they access Bishop's memory banks, but they can't prove it, right? Try to prove it.
And I will say, I find it extremely weird that Weyland-Yutani built androids and then didn't have some kind of failsafe in place that lets them know if their memory banks are accessed.
Well,
like, why would they not put that in there, you know?
Maybe because Bishop isn't a Weyland-Yutani model. He's a Hyperdyne Systems model. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
You've got me there.
And remember, we did learn, and I'm taking this as canon, we did learn in River of Pain that nothing about Bishop's brain could be rewired or like altered, according to, you know, that conversation Burke had with Christ, why am I not remembering the guy's name?
Come on, I know you know.
No, I'm on the spot now. It ain't gonna happen. Gorman. I said it at the same time. It counts. The conversation that Paul Reiser, I already forgot his character's name, had with Gorman. I can only remember one name at a time. Stop it. the conversation that Burke and Gorman had, Bishop's brain can't be rewired or reprogrammed in any way. And I think that that's an interesting, like the idea that he's a Hyperdyne Systems model. He's not a Weyland-Yutani model or a Siegson or something like that. Like that could be the reason why.
Could be.
So, yeah. So even like that gives Weyland-Yutani, like they won't have the ability to find out if his brain was accessed or not because he's not one of theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's what got them back in the game of like producing their own synthetics and not sort of subcontracting Hyperdyne Systems anymore, which then leads to Hyperdyne Systems wanting to sabotage them in Aliens Infiltrator, that novel, which is the reason that you and I get to play Fireteam Elite now. Put it on the wiki. Let's get it on Xenopedia.
But anyway, the whole point of that conversation between all the people on the Rodina station is that they decide to give Bishop back,
Yes.
but they also, even more importantly, decide to give him new legs first.
Yes.
And
as a
those
gesture.
new legs are going to be extremely plot relevant later on in the book, which is why I'm bringing it up now.
Extremely might be stretching it a little. But they are plot.
I mean, I would argue that the entire tenor of like the climax of the story hinges on the fact that his legs do not work correctly.
That's fair, but that I think was probably a little bit more explicit in the novel versus certainly the comic book.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll continue on here because now a couple of the boys on Anchor Point are going to have to do a big repair to the Sulaco so that the Sulaco can get sent back to Earth with Newt aboard.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
Did you notice that right away? That like, because like I knew that Newt was going back to Gateway Station, but specifically how and on what ship, I didn't actually realize until I read the script. And listeners, I read the script last of these four things. So all four versions of the story, I was just like, oh, she's just generically on a ship. I didn't realize until the fourth go around of the story that ship was specifically the Sulaco.
Yeah, I knew it from the comic. I don't know that they said it in the audio drama. They probably did. Again, this thing is brisk. That audio drama is like 2 hours and 10 minutes, like you said, right?
Yeah.
It's brisk. It's easy to miss things. And that doesn't get a lot of focus in it. But you can tell it's the Sulaco in the comic panel that's showing her leave, you know, where she gives Hicks the thumbs up and says, affirmative, like she do. That classic Newt line. Which,
none of the three versions, i.e. the non-script versions, did that line correctly.
Yeah.
Because in the audio drama, they say affirmative, and in the comic, they just write it as normal affirmative. And
well, she says it a couple times in like she says the one where they all say affirmative. She says affirmative, and doesn't she also say I affirmative at one point? Like she says it wrong.
Yeah,
at the end, which is funny.
They like I heard them deliver this line like over the course of the novelization and the audio drama and reading it in the comic and reading it in the script. I saw them deliver that line multiple times, and none of them depict them as saying it the same way as they did in the second movie, and it drove me up the wall every time. I'm like, come on, it's obviously a reference. Get the reference right.
They made the weird choice in the audio drama for her to say, hey, Hicks, take it sleazy, catch you on the flip side. And he says it back to her as if that's what the inside joke was, you know?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. Anyway, we're not even there yet, right? So there's this team. They're lifting some kind of some large part of the cooling system.
Yeah.
Like using a shuttle, and using a power loader with an enclosed. In the comic book, it's like a power loader with an enclosed cockpit for, I guess, EVA work, right?
Yeah, correct.
Which is very cool looking. And they are lifting this big, huge, mechanical cube out. And they're having trouble getting it out. It's stuck. It's hung up on something, and they rip a bunch of a jacket and cigarettes and keys and stuff out of this big cube that's part of the cooling system. And they're like, these goddamn Marines and their fucking messes and shit. I don't understand. Can you tell me where that jacket came from?
I certainly can. No, I cannot.
Okay, because I was like, this is too specific a reference. Like, how did this jacket get in there? It didn't belong to Kurtz, right?
I didn't know who. Well, they very specifically say it was a colonial marine jacket, but like, I don't know whose jacket it could have been. I don't remember a scene in the movie of anyone noticeably, like, the movie pointing out them losing a jacket.
No,
like it like you said, it felt too specific for it to just be a generic explanation, and it felt like it had to be a reference. But it's not a reference to anything, because that never happens in Aliens.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they yanked this big old cube out, and it's depicted as a cube in the comic book. That's the best visual reference we have for it, right?
Yep, it's just big cube.
And it's got, like, you know, pipes and like conduit and machine parts all over it, and it looks like it's like industrial, like Aliens parts. We have a conversation between Rivera, who is, I guess, the head of the UPP on the station, right? And Rossetti, my 8th grade science teacher, Mr. Capo, where they're arranging, like, the meet to return Bishop. And Rivera is very much like, we're going to return your synthetic to you, which means you have no grounds whatsoever for keeping Kurtz detained.
And then Rossetti's like, who's Kurtz? Never heard the name before.
Yes.
And then dude's like, sure.
Yeah, he's playing dumb. I feel like in the audio drama, they were like, yeah, Kurtz is dead. You can't have him back. Sorry, he died. Like, I'm not sure if that happened or not. I remember that happening, though. Then we get the scene in the lab where Tully and Spence are showing Wells and Fox the recombinant DNA thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where they're putting the genetic material on a piece of human DNA, and it's like structurally doesn't look anything like human DNA, but then like totally encapsulates the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like in the comic book, it looks like who's the bad guy in Sonic Forces that all the Sonic fans are like horny for.
Are you thinking of Silver? Or no, the new one is Infinite, I believe.
I think I'm talking about Infinite. And
the one like with the mask with the big crack in it.
Yeah, everyone like all the people are horny for.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Infinite.
Yes. This looks like the cyber technology that like Infinite uses in Sonic Forces. That's a reference for the 7 people listening to this show who also played Sonic Forces.
Well, unfortunately, I'm one of those 7 people, and I'm on the show. So as far as I'm concerned, the reference works.
Okay, good. And they're like, holy shit, this DNA thing is awesome. How fast does it happen? And they're like, what you see, like it just happened. Like it happens that fast. It's almost instantaneous.
Yeah.
And we also, by the way, terminated all the tests. And Fox is like, you did what the fuck now? And they're like, you saw what this does. We are not testing this anymore, right?
Yep.
At the same time, over on Rodina in their biolab, they have successfully used the genetic material they recovered from Bishop to start growing a xenomorph embryo.
They sure have, baby.
And it's coming along nicely.
I believe, I don't know if it's the one specifically in Rodina Lab, but I know at one point the book describes the embryos as looking like a miniaturized skinless dolphin at one point.
Gross.
And so I believe it is specifically a chest burster that they have.
Yes. Yeah. They are growing the comic shows it. It's got the head. It's got the back fins. It's got some of the limbs, but it's still got the long, thick tail. So it's not fully. So it's somewhere between. Maybe we're catching it between chest burster and like starting to grow. You know.
Yeah, I got you.
And they're having this conversation about the people here, the doctors or whoever, having this conversation about how this thing is like a weapon. They describe it as the fruit of some ancient experiment, a living artifact, the product of genetic engineering. A weapon. And tell me that ain't some fucking Prometheus Covenant shit right there, right?
Well, it's very specifically not Covenant shit based on what David does in Covenant, but yes, I know what you mean.
I mean, they're describing this thing as,
created.
If this is created, if this is the fruit of some ancient experiment, right, that could be, they could be crediting David as that. right? I mean, I don't think they are. I mean, you know how I feel about it.
I don't think they are either, because David as a character did not yet exist when the script was written.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, I'm just talking about specifically how the ideas in this could apply to Prometheus, or that, like, they could have retroactively written some of those ideas in Prometheus and Covenant off of this, the same way the DNA, like, specifically, like, the genetic material taking over the mutating the host thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm saying, like, these ideas are very parallel to ideas we see in Covenant and Prometheus and other, like, pathogen related stuff.
Well, to be fair, the idea seems to have been from the very beginning, xenomorphs were intended to have been created by the engineers. And then in Covenant, Ridley Scott was like, I'm going to change it to David last minute. But like the intent was always there for them to have been created, as far as I can tell.
Right. Yeah, I know. I know they didn't think too much about it in Alien, right? And they don't even consider it all in Aliens. Yeah. The only piece of like even like the Outbreak series, right? The Dark Horse comics, like it's not the space jockeys who made the Xenomorph, it's the space jockeys who weaponized the Xenomorph. The Xenomorph has a home world and just existed, and they're using them and taking them around to use them as weapons, but they didn't make it, in that early canon. And maybe that idea was kicking around in Ridley Scott's head from the beginning. I hope not. And my personal feelings on it are that it's way scarier if these things are just out there. Yeah. And my personal theory is neither David nor the engineers created the Xenomorph. The engineers created the pathogen from the Xenomorph, right? That's my opinion. That's my theory, rather. That they experimented on the Xenomorph and developed the pathogen that way. Not the other way around, that they use the pathogen to create xenomorphs. Anyway, we're getting in the weeds here. We don't need to talk about that now. But just this idea of this thing positing in 1989 or whenever this was written, that that these things are the end of another race's arms race, right? Yeah. The end result of someone else's arms race. It's interesting. And it's an idea that pops up again in the future, in the rest of the franchise. So it's just interesting to me that it was existing all those years ago in this unproduced screenplay, and then sort of got picked out, or other people had the exact same idea had the exact same idea and started sprinkling that into their alien stories.
For sure.
Anyway, then they make the exchange, right?
Yep.
The UPP sails a vessel into Anchor Point and return Bishop, who is standing and walking, right? And just being kind of weirdly Bishop-like. Who is the pilot? The UPP pilot is. Do we?
I don't remember what her name is. The Vietnamese lady.
Right. Yeah. That's.
Yeah. I don't remember her name.
Who I believe was present. She was one of the ones who was present with Kurtz at the beginning as well, right?
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, they make the exchange, and Bishop immediately requests to be totally analyzed and gone over to see if they've done anything to him, Mm-hmm. And he checks out okay. Is it at this point that the UPP discover that Kurtz is dead, or they just continue to not know anything about it in the other drafts?
To be honest, I don't really remember for sure them finding out either way. But again, most of the versions of this I read a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Sure. So I may be just forgetting them finding out. But I don't recall them ever actually knowing for sure what happened to him.
Okay. I think we can speed things up here a little bit. We do have a conversation about Bishop's legs, his knees are now, and his other major joints are now reconstructed in polycarbon, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And someone makes a comment that polycarbon, that's not going to hold up worth a damn.
Yep. It's not as good as the metal and stuff that they would use here on Anchor Point, which leads me to believe, why didn't they just fix his legs once he got back? But whatever, that's not beside the point.
And they're probably just going to wait for them to break again. Yeah. Bishop's not a human, so they don't really care that much. They don't even care about humans. I mean,
that's true. Yeah. That's true. You got me there. I believe this is when the tissue lab scene happens, isn't it?
Yes. We're back in the tissue lab
And it's Tully and Spence, and then Spence leaves to go get them coffee.
And we see that they've been growing tiny ovomorphs in like these. They're kind of cute. I'm not going to lie. Especially when you see the one open in the comic.
But yeah, and like they're inside like big, like, glass containers and stuff. And Spence leaves to go get the two of them coffee. And while Spence is gone, Wells comes in.
Yes.
And basically, demands the notes and, starts ordering Tully around. And he's like, "You're not my boss. You can't just tell me to do stuff." And she's like, "You don't fucking get it. You got to listen to me." And then she gets cut off when the tubes start breaking open.
Right. Yeah, he does point out that their name tags have a white strip on them that if you are contaminated turns red, which is a fun little piece of technology. But yeah, as they are having this conversation, the pods holding these little ovomorphs they're growing crack and explode. Mm-hmm. They like burst.
And they fall, like the two of them, Wells and Tully, fall down to the ground, and then one of the miniature ovomorphs lands directly in front of Tully's face and unfolds, and he's like, "Oh no." But a facehugger doesn't come out. Instead, it farts a little, and then like a cloud puff comes, like, just like what we later find out to be spores comes out. But it shoots out this little cloud puff, and Tully's like, "Huh, that's weird." And then nothing else really happens.
We're just going to point this out again. We saw these little spore-like things in a little movie called Alien Covenant.
We sure did.
Yeah.
So yeah, it spits out the spores, and Tully's like, what? And then the two of them get scooped up and go through decontamination.
Yes. And I think there's some comments about how humiliating she finds it.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, she has a lot of feelings about a lot of things.
She does. And he's like, "Well, come on. We just came in contact with alien genetic material we were growing in a lab. Like, we got to get scrubbed the fuck down."
And this wouldn't have happened if you had worn that color-changing script like I told you to.
Yes. Meanwhile, Newt is getting ready to go, but she wants to see Ripley and Hicks first, right?
Yep.
So she's talking to somebody, I think the same Marine escort or Weyland-Yutani escort she had before, about how she has to go back. I don't know. She's hanging out with Hicks. She's absolutely hanging out with Hicks.
She's with Hicks right now.
Hicks in this comic book panel, by the way, he's got his pack of cigarettes like tucked under his sleeve, like Snake from The Simpsons.
Very 50s greaser style.
I love it.
And she's worried about how, like, how will Ripley know where I am if I'm gone before she wakes up? What am I going to do? Maybe I should stand around and wait until she wakes up. And he's like, "Another ship's not coming through here for another 2 months. Trust me, you gotta go."
Yeah. Get out of here now.
So she makes a little star map on a piece of paper.
Super cute.
Where, like, it points where Anchor Point is, and then it points where she is. And she has like her and her grandparents' address written on it.
Yeah. Newt Jordan with an E.
Mm-hmm.
Care of Mr. and Mrs. Harold Jordan, apartment 6784, 987435 Greenlee Place, level 3, sub-basement 7, New Portland, Oregon.
Yep.
Not going to read the rest of those numbers because there's a lot of them. Something I love, I love the idea of her drawing a star chart of Anchor Point is here, Earth is here, right? Like... That's great. That's just a really nice thing that, and it's a believable thing that a kid would do. Like, here's a map back to Earth, but she's wearing a shirt in the comic that you can only read the text on in one panel, and to the point where it doesn't look like there's any text on it in the other panels. Oh, you can see it a little bit later on, and but you can only see this in select panels. Her shirt says, "Where the hell is Anchor Point?"
That's a great shirt. I love it.
It is. I love the idea that Anchor Point, this biolab in the middle, like in deep space, has like a gift shop, right? It's like these are just shirts you can just buy if you like just swing by Anchor Point, grab like.
Well, I mean, like they have a mall concourse on it.
That's true. Good point. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I think it's funny. Anyway. Yeah. So she leaves this note for Ripley, right? With her home address and everything. And she's talking to Ripley. She's at her bedside and she's saying, "I'm going to stay with my grandparents in Oregon." Hicks says that's a good place. here's a map for you. You have to come and stay with me there when you get better, right? Super sweet.
Right.
And at the same time as this, Bishop is getting a promotion, right? He's talking to Fox, and Fox is asking him what he's determined about his physical and chemical analysis, and he says he's had some minor repairs. His legs have been fixed up. He can't be reprogrammed, which we also learned from River of Pain. And he cannot tell if they accessed his memory or not. And then Fox is like, good enough for me. We're going to put you in charge of the biolab.
Yeah, he's like, I can't trust Tully or Spence, so I'm getting rid of them and naming you in their place. And he's like, you got it, boss.
I'm just a robot. I'll do whatever you say. And I will admit at this point in the story, I'm a little bit sus of Bishop, right? Like, I am. Because who knows?
I mean,
like, I think that was the intent. You're supposed to be a little bit like, is this the same Bishop as it was? Can we still trust him? You know?
See, it's funny you say that because it never occurred to me that that was supposed to indicate we might be suspicious of him, because it's like, why did he do it? Because he was given a direct order to do it. That's why. Right.
Yeah, but like, you know, you feel like that isn't something that the character would do based on what we learned about him in Aliens, where he was like he was essentially going against the mission protocols. I know he didn't have any, right, to like help bring back the thing, and they put that scene in River of Pain to explain why he wasn't, but like, you know, he doesn't seem like a guy who just follows orders. Like, he seemed to have like some real, like, his own way of thinking, you know, his own consciousness. He's not just like a working Joe. So just following orders doesn't sound like the kind of thing Bishop would do to me. Right.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that never struck me as suspicious at all, because like, you know, the guy that was there who was like outranking him is like, you're the new science officer, and he's like, just following orders, baby. Like, it never occurred to me at all that that was intended to be suspicious. So when he said, you got it, I was like, yeah, okay.
Right.
So yeah, I guess I just didn't pick up on that. So
now we get the big reveal, right? In the docking bay on Anchor Point, where that bad part, that damaged unit from the Sulaco, was pulled out and parked in the loading bay. We can see very clearly now that the Xenomorph drone that had burst out of Kurtz has stowed away inside that cube. Just sort of like meshed into like the pipes and conduit and such from the side. So now we got a Xenomorph on Anchor Point. Finally, right? Finally, we got some alien shit happening.
Yep.
Jesus
Pretty
Christ. Biolab's been like wiped, and Spence is being told that her and Tully have been taken off the project and have to sign forfeit agreements under security clauses, and Spence is just like, fuck it, fine, whatever. Wells and Fox are putting Bishop in charge of these things. They're telling him about how he asked them if they're going to terminate the embryos they've been growing. Wells says yes, but not before we clone them. And he says, okay, I see what's going on. I'll take care of everything. Now, Newt's finally getting off this rock, which is not a rock. It's a space station. But yeah, we get the affirmative scene we talked about earlier, her banging "Where the hell is Anchor Point" shirt, and she's out of here, right?
Yep. She just gets on the ship, and then it pulls away, and that's the end of that.
Yes. Finally. I'm choosing to believe that she has a happy ending in this. Ripley, not so much. She's been in a coma this whole time. We jump over to Rodina, right? We're going to check in to see what's been going on with the UPP.
And what's going on with them is that everyone is fucking dead.
Dead and or dying. There is a drone loose on their ship as well. Absolutely fucking up the place.
As far as I can tell, I mean, again, it's been like almost 2 weeks since I read it, so maybe I'm forgetting, but in my brain, I remember there's only one Xenomorph.
I believe there's only one. We don't spend a lot of time with them in the audio drama. There's carnage, there's something loose, they're firing weapons, they're trying to get away from it. This big chap is just like on a rampage.
But yeah, this one Xenomorph, it basically single-handedly kills like everyone in the entire space station. It rules.
Yeah, and Mr. Capo, my 8th grade science teacher, is trying to get a hold of Rivera and the Rodina, and they're not answering to anything, but they find out that they do intercept like an emergency call, right? They find out that the Rodina has sent out, they call it a, what do they call it? A squirt transmission, which is gross.
Yeah, that is certainly what they call it. Yes, you'd think they would call it a burst transmission, but here we are.
No, squirt transmission. And they have called out to the battle cruiser Nikolai Stoico, which is a couple of hours away. And I don't really know what else happens with that. They're just having a hard time reaching Anchor Point Station, or reaching Rodina.
I believe that's pretty much all we see of that at that point. Like,
Yes.
We'll find out what happened with Rodina when we check back in with them later. But I'm pretty sure that's basically all we get about it for right now.
Right. On Anchor Point Station, Hicks has been summoned by Spence and Tully and the orange-haired lady whose name I don't know. Do you know who that is?
The orange-haired lady, would that be Jackson?
Maybe Jackson. She must have taken her
because
hat off.
I'm pretty sure I thought this scene was Hicks, Rossetti, Fox, Wells, and then the diplomatic guy, whatever his name was.
No, maybe we must be talking about different scenes.
Yeah, maybe we are then.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is a scene where they're trying to get Hicks to help them destroy the...
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. So we were talking about different scenes. I think that is Jackson.
Okay. She took her hat off. I didn't recognize her. Yeah, and Jackson was present when Newt was boarding the Sulaco as well. So
yeah,
we haven't seen a whole lot of characters, especially in the audio drama and in the comic book. But like Anchor Point's supposed to be full of people, right? Like
maybe
because there's like 7 people that we deal with in this.
Yeah, like we have our handful of main characters, and then like we're not really given a lot of scenes where we're able to see like anyone else that's around, but presumably there's intended to be kind of a lot of people because like I mentioned earlier, there's like a mall food court built into this place.
Right.
So presumably it is supposed to hold a lot of people at once.
Yeah, and I know in draft 1 that was a little bit more action heavy. I think there's a lot more people around than draft 2. He probably simplified that when he got rid of some of those bigger set pieces like at the end and stuff. Anyway, these people we're gonna say it's Jackson, Spence, Tully, and Hicks, and they're asking Hicks to help them get into the lab and destroy all of the alien genetic material. And he's like,
okay, quick question.
Yeah.
Are you sure Tully is there?
Yes, Tully is there.
Okay, because based on what happens to him later and the fact that like we already saw him like go through decon and stuff, I seemed to recall that he wasn't in this scene. But again, I'm not actively looking at the book like you are, so if he's there, then he's there.
Yeah, it is because it does take a minute, right? Because what happens to him and what happens to I will never remember her name.
Wells
happens once they actually enter the lab, right? So
yeah.
Anyway, so Hicks is like, they're gonna know that we did this, and Spence is like, who cares, right? Who cares if they know that we did this? Like they put Bishop in charge. We don't know if we can trust him. We don't know what's up with him. The UPP might have messed with him. We have to get in there and destroy these things. Oh, you know what? Maybe it's not. Maybe Tully's not there. I think he is, but Tatsumi is also there. Tatsumi, one of the other sort of just ancillary characters.
He's just like a lab worker guy.
Yeah, he's the one who intercepted the UPP ship when they brought Bishop back. Anyway,
yeah.
They're gonna go into the lab and they're gonna destroy all the embryos, and that's good news for everybody. Meanwhile, one of the other just like lab techs, one of the guys who was in decontamination, is taking a decontamination shower in his decontamination suit when he gets murdered by something with a long spiky tail. No idea what that is.
I can't imagine what that could possibly imply.
Who knows? From here, Fox has gone into the food court that you talked about earlier, where Walker, one of the maintenance workers who did that overhaul on the
Moving
Stalker
the cube.
Well, yeah, one of the dedicated cube movers. Welcome to Crew Expendable. I am Cube Mover Hallstrom. Yeah, he's like, yeah, I yanked the thing out, and God, that place is such a fucking mess. Like, I couldn't unfuck that thing, so I just parked it in the dock, right? And Fox is like, what?
And Fox is like, ruh-roh, and like immediately bolts his ass out of there.
Yeah, which I don't understand. How would he know that like there's something weird about that? You know what I mean? But he does, I guess.
I mean, maybe he just assumes. I don't know.
Maybe. Meanwhile, Hicks starts banging on the lab door. And he's like, Bishop let us in. Bishop lets them all in. Spence is like, we're going to destroy the embryos. Don't try to stop us. And he says, but if you do it, the company will know who is responsible. And they're like, we don't care. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I was about to do it myself. The responsibility would have been mine alone.
And then there's this absolutely great like little back and forth where he's like, I was about to do it myself. And then someone, maybe Spence, is like, well, why the hell didn't you then? And he goes, because you knocked on the door and I walked over to let you guys in.
Yeah, it's really great. Yes.
He's like, hello. And they're like, oh, yeah, duh.
He's like, I was literally doing it and you stopped me. And there was, even at this point, I was a little, in the audio drama particularly, I was like, that's a little, like, is he just saying that to them? Like, that's way too coincidental, you know? But, yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm going to destroy them. And destroy them he does. He hits it just as Wells is charging into the room. And she's like, you motherfuckers. And she's all angry. And then Spence punches her in the gut or something.
Yep.
And then Wells starts fucking mutating, almost like she's been exposed to pathogen. Because I'm going to keep hammering that point home.
I know you are.
Except like her arms like start extending and her head gets all weird shaped and she looks a little bit like a Fifield monster for a second there until all of her skin and extra bones break away, leaving essentially a xenomorph as it is depicted in the comics, that with a clear shell on its head where you can see a skull inside it, like a humanoid skull.
It otherwise basically looks like a normal xenomorph. The only real difference is that the black dome on the top is transparent.
Yes, it is fucking wild. It is wild that she just mutated into a xenomorph.
Yeah, it's like these creatures are referred to as hybrids, and it basically physically transforms you into a xenomorph. And then there is a moment where you grab the human skin and rip it off of yourself, very dramatically, and reveal the hybrid creature underneath.
It's fucking wild, and it's cool. I'm not sure they have like the extra jaw, right? I guess it depends on the artwork. It looks like they do. But like, yeah, they are basically just xenomorphs. The head shape is different. Yeah,
they're just xenomorphs pretty much. I mean, they're referred to as hybrids. And so like mentally and physiologically, I categorize them as two different creatures.
Sure.
But like, they're basically just xenomorphs.
Yeah.
There isn't really a meaningful difference between the two of them.
Very similar, because of that skull, very similar looking in a lot of ways to the hybrid from Alien Resurrection.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
In my opinion. I mean, it's not an exact look, but it's like, yeah, okay. I see where Joss Whedon got that idea from. That guy's always been a hack, too.
Also true.
I do love Buffy, but there were a lot of better Buffy writers than Joss Whedon, so. Anyway, so fucking Wells has just turned into a xenomorph. She grabs my 8th grade science teacher, Mr. Capo, and
I want to interject here to remind everyone that the character's name is Rossetti, not Capo.
I've said it enough times.
Well, my point is that you've said the joke name more often than you've said the real name. Right. And so I don't want people to actually think the character's name is actually Capo.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So she grabs Rossetti and just sort of drags him out of the room, and they're all like, what the fuck? And then Spence is like, hey, she puts together, she's like, whoa, she was exposed in the lab. So is Tully. We got to find Tully, right?
Yep.
Meanwhile, some chaos is going on. Chaos that I can't totally follow in the comic.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, for some reason, Tatsumi is like torching the mainframe computer, I believe.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
he did do that. Yes,
I think he's doing that to just like destroy evidence of the experiments and everything. Is that correct?
probably. I don't
Right.
really know why he was doing it either.
No, it must have been part of their plan to like destroy the evidence. And Spence or whoever, I believe it's Spence, does get like a message from Tully that he left on like a recording device, like a video recording device, or this is like FaceTime, I'm not sure, where he can like tell that something is happening to himself, and he says something's happening, the bad strip went red, so he knows he's been exposed to something.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Hicks has gotten Ripley, still unconscious, out of the med bay. He's grabbed the star map that Newt left, and he is shoving her into an escape pod with the map to get her off the ship. So Ripley, just not present in this story anymore after this. She's once again launched out into the vast reaches of space all alone, hoping somebody will pick her up. Not a great...
Third time in a row, baby.
Not a great fate for Ripley, right? Not like Newt's happy ending. Like it.
Well, I mean, it worked out so well for her the last 2 times that happened to her. So.
Here's my big question. Why didn't they put her on the Sulaco and send her back to Gateway Station? Was it just Weyland-Yutani like wanting to like because Weyland-Yutani's at Gateway Station also, right? They know she hasn't been infected. Why didn't they just send her back with Newt?
I think the reason why is because they kind of just like, and when I say they, I mean William Gibson kind of just forgot she was there.
I mean, I know that like part of this was like, I think it was the same reason they didn't want to use Ripley in Outbreak, that like 20th Century Fox was probably like, we don't know if we're ever going to be able to get Sigourney Weaver back for another sequel. So if you write her into the story, she can't have a very big part, you know? Yeah. I don't know. It just makes sense to me that they should have just stuck her in the Sulaco and shipped her back to Gateway, and that would have made everybody happy, right? But at least she got out of this now. At least she's not here for this chaos, you know. Tatsumi's destroying lab stuff. It's Tully, right?
Depends on what character it is you're talking about.
I think I'm talking about Tully. Yeah, I'm talking about Tully. Tully his message is continuing where he says, I've something's happening to me. I don't want to get worse. He takes himself to a deep freeze locker and gets frozen like mid-mutation.
Yep, and I should say he gets frozen and like dies. Like he is dead when they find him.
Yes, he's done. It's pretty... I thought that this was very fucking cool, that he like knew something was wrong, and he's like, I have to figure out how to kill myself in a way that like I don't have to like actively do anything, if that makes sense.
I want you to picture what that scene would look like if they actually made this script into a movie. Like, just imagine that scene in your head.
Well, I don't have to, because it's in the comic book. Maybe I'll make it the podcast art so people can see it. I'm probably not going to do that. Yeah, but yeah, so he was the other infected hybrid, right? And he has gotten himself frozen and died. And before he fully mutated. Back on the UPP Rodina, there is just the one... Korean, is that what you said?
Vietnamese.
There's just the one Vietnamese woman as a survivor, and we see like the rest of that station has been sort of nested, cocooned, right?
For sure.
On Anchor Point, Fox is trying to escape in the shuttle, in the Weyland-Yutani shuttle that presumably he arrived in. But that shuttle has been turned into a little nest with a guy sort of holed up and sort of decomposing, and the drone is in there. And this is the scene that William Gibson wrote in as a tribute to the egg morphing scene that was cut from the original Alien. So I like that he was trying to bring that back into canon, right? And this is why I feel like the idea that an ovomorph could have gestated inside of Bishop sort of works with the aspects of the alien biology that he's playing with in this story, you know?
Yeah, I spoiler alert for later on in the conversation. In the first draft of this script, there's a queen in it, but there, as far as I can recall, is not in the second draft.
There is
and
not.
So And so I'm guessing that part of the reason he put that ovomorphing scene in is because he's like, well, since there isn't a queen in this draft, we got to, like, explain where they all came from. So let's bring that egg morphing back, baby.
Right. There is not a queen in this, but he does make it a point to say, like, in their studying, in Bishop's studying of the Xenomorph, Bishop determined that any of these Xenomorphs all of them have the potential to become a queen. And the idea is if you have one of these things loose somewhere, you just need one and it can take over everything. Right. Which I think is a good reversal of Aliens, because in Aliens, they're like, well, all these things come from eggs. Who's laying the eggs? It sets up the queen as like a different species, not a different species, but like a specific class of xenomorph.
The queen, like in Aliens, the queen is kind of the head of the snake. You kill the queen and all the rest of them are basically done for. Right. Whereas in this, it's exactly the opposite. They're like, if they don't have a queen, they'll manage. It's fine.
Yeah, they'll become, one of them can become a queen. They can that seems to be the way things have gone, right? I mean, we understand that, like, I think Praetorians can become queens or some shit like that, right? Like
I mean, pretty much by this point, like, egg morphing has effectively become canon pretty much.
Good.
So,
which I'm into, because the idea present in this of, like, no, it just takes one of these things. One of these things in an environment where it has stuff to feed off of and stuff to, like, serve as hosts. A new colony can start from one of these. That's fucking terrifying. That's the whole idea of these things being like a plague in space. Like, if it's dependent on a queen being present, less scary, because it's like, oh, there's no queen, we just got to kill the one and we'll be okay. But, like, no, if the one has the ability to create others, no matter what the situation is, that's fucking scary.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure I've said this on a previous episode, but, like, I mean, I'm going to go on record again in case I haven't. I don't really love the idea of queens in the first place in the context of Alien.
Right.
Because, like, giving them a queen and having, like, the queen's the one that lays the eggs. Now they have a caste system. And it's like, that basically just turns them into big bugs.
Sure.
Whereas, like, if they have the ability to literally physically mutate people via egg morphing into a gigantic egg, that little divide stops them from being, a big bug, and turns them into, some weird, insane alien monster that, like, doesn't biologically make sense.
Right.
Like, giving them a queen, I'm like, well, that's the same hive structure that, like, ants have.
Right.
That makes sense to me in a way that xenomorphs shouldn't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that, I think. I don't know what I've said in the past, but I'm definitely with you on that idea at this point in my alien digesting career.
Yeah, like, even if we said the opposite thing before, like in a previous episode, over the course of time, our opinions have now changed to this at this point.
Yeah, and that's going to happen all the time.
Yeah.
I think we got a lot of ground to cover here, and I really want to get into, like, some of the differences. So I'm going to try to breeze through the rest of this, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, it's fine.
So we do get a little cutaway back to the UPP station where the survivor hasn't actually defeated the xenomorph yet, but she is boarding a dropship and is attacked by the drone, but she takes off out of the space station and kicks the thing out of the airlock with her, right? Because it was on. She shakes it loose from the dropship as that UPP ship,
the Nikolai
Stoico has arrived and fires some nukes and destroys the station.
Yeah, it literally blows it up with nuclear missiles. Like, it, and I should specify, it literally actually is a real actual nukes. That's not me, like, interjecting or editorializing. It literally is nuclear bombs that they use.
they nuke the Rodina, presumably killing the drone in the process, right? And the people on Anchor Point pick this up and they're like, holy shit, they nuked them. I can't believe they sent for help and their own people nuke them. And somebody else comments, like, that's probably the help that they asked for.
Yeah, that might be what they asked for. Yeah, exactly.
It's very cool. We get an update that Fox is locked in the shuttle. not really locked himself in the shuttle. He's been taken hostage in there by the Xenomorph, right?
Mm-hmm.
The air scrubber is blocked with some kind of gunk, so we know that the drone has started to like nest inside the inside Anchor Point at some point. Spence has reported to everybody what happened to Tully. Hicks is smoking cigarettes and asking if they have guns, and they're like, no, we don't have, this is a non-military base, right? We don't have guns. We want to set an example. Probably largely also because they're in such close proximity to UPP space. They're like, we're not going to have any weapons, so we're never like mistaken as being hostile towards the UPP.
But then Tatsumi has a flash of inspiration.
Yes.
He takes Hicks to the morgue where they stored the body of that UPP guy who they did not remove from the armor. And remember how earlier we said they had guns built into their gloves?
Uh-huh. Guess what Kurtz was wearing? Yeah, no, people get it. We've also learned that there is a colony ship called the Kansas City headed towards Anchor Point Station for like refueling and whatnot.
Yep.
So this place does just serve as, outside of their biolab, and I guess their galaxy famous food court and t-shirt shop, they do just serve as a waypoint for ships passing by, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, this place is open to the public, yes.
Yes, and they're like,
but I believe they say that Kansas City has like 300 civilians in cryo sleep on it.
Yes,
or something like that.
300 colonists in hypersleep. So they don't want that transport's crew to get on Anchor Point and get exposed to xenomorphs or hybrids or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also the people on Anchor Point's chance to get out of here. So they're like, we got to deal with this shit. All of our lifeboats have been sabotaged by Fox, except for the one that Ripley escaped in, presumably because he had launched that one first. So Fox sabotaged the remaining ones.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the Kansas City's our only way out of here as well. So, their plan now is to set the station for self-destruct.
Their plan is Bishop is going to go down to the core and, turn off like its overheating mechanism or whatever it is to make it blow up.
Classic.
While Hicks leads the rest of the survivors out to... I don't remember where he's going to lead them, but he's going to lead them somewhere that will presumably keep them safe until the Kansas City arrives.
Wasn't he going to take them?
I think he was going to take them to the shuttle.
Right.
Because this is before they found out that the shuttle got taken over by xenomorphs.
Correct. I believe they're going to try to get onto the shuttle because it's not a long-range shuttle, but it'll get them out there past the blast radius so that they can be picked up by the Kansas City. So, that's the plan. Bishop's going to pull a Nostromo, shut down the cooling system for the fusion reactor. Or I guess in this case, it's an actual fusion plant. Like they just have a full-ass power plant in this thing somehow.
They sure do.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, Halliday is the lady with the red hair, not Jackson. Sorry, I messed that up earlier. We are not going back to fix that.
To be honest, I totally forgot she was even in the second draft of this story.
Halliday is in the eco pod trying to find the lemurs, where she is then just absolutely wrecked and eaten by the hybrid wells, Xeno wells.
And gets turned into one herself.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yes, you're right, because there are multiple hybrids certainly in the audio drama version.
There are 3 hybrids over the course of this story, and one of them, Tully, is already dead.
Right.
So, yeah.
So Halliday gets turned into another hybrid. Everyone's trying to make way to their respective locations. This is where I'll give you a chance to talk about Bishop's leg if you want.
Bishop goes off by himself. I think he might have like a handgun, like a sidearm with him, but otherwise he basically just runs off on his own and heads down to the core and it takes a little bit of ways to like hack and break himself into the core to get through security. He goes to activate like the shutdown, the self-destruct, and it doesn't work. So what he has to do is he has to reprogram how the self-destruct operates, so that he can do it the new way to activate it. And then while he's on his way back, his leg breaks the fuck off.
Right. And he looks
like the knee just snaps off and his leg is flopping there uselessly. And so he can like only move around with one leg and his arms. But like he knows that because now all of his weight is on the one leg, that's gonna break too.
Right. And he's just like, polycarbon.
Yeah.
Yes. And the rest of the survivors are trying to get to the loading bay when one of the hybrids pops out and chomps down on Tatsumi's leg.
That is correct. They are specifically climbing up a ladder inside of an empty elevator shaft.
And it pops out of a vent and chomps down on his leg, and then Hicks like fires at it down the vent. I don't know if he kills it or not. Does he kill it in that scene? But he does exclaim "die" as he like blasts out of this, because he's only got a few shots on this thing. That's important.
The wrist mounted gun only has a total of 5 shots in it, and I don't think he kills it at this point, because I know one of them pops up earlier, but it might just be the other one that wasn't the one here. So I don't really know for sure whether he kills it or not, but I don't think we ever see 2 hybrids later on. So maybe whichever one this one's did die at this point. I'm not really sure.
I'm under the assumption that he did kill this one, because we do only see one later.
Yeah.
But they all get to the loading bay. They're grabbing oxygen tanks. They're putting on EVA suits. They're trying to get to the shuttle, and Hicks walks onto the shuttle and sees it all nested up and sees Fox all decomposing in there. Again, more egg morphing. He throws some grenades inside, and it explodes just as Tatsumi, who got bit by the hybrid, starts bleeding out of his eyeballs, filling his helmet with blood and mutating into another hybrid. But Hicks successfully blows this one away.
That is correct. That one definitely gets killed, yes.
But now, man, we get the battle of the century, right? Because another hybrid has shown up and killed Jackson this time. But so has the OG drone Xenomorph, also has shown up in the loading bay.
Also correct.
And this is some Freddy versus Jason shit where the Xenomorph and the hybrid just start fucking fighting each other, right?
And I'm not gonna lie, it's cool that they have them fight, but this isn't really that much of a fight. I'm not gonna lie.
No, this is like, have you seen Godzilla Final Wars?
I have, yes.
So when the American Godzilla, the Geno, depending on where you land in the fandom, either Godzilla in name only or Zilla, as it's also called on occasion. The one that looks like the American Godzilla with the Matthew Broderick movie.
Yeah.
Lands in Sydney, Australia, right? And real Godzilla shows up to fight it and just hurls it into the Sydney Opera House and atomic breaths it into pieces.
Yep.
That's kind of what happens here, because the hybrid goes to fight the drone, and the drone basically just picks the hybrid up and aliens it, which of course means ripping it in half across the torso.
That is correct. Right in half, just like horizontally right across the middle.
Yeah.
Whoop, just picks it up and, bishops it like at the end of the movie. Just rip.
That's right.
And that's it. That's the whole fight.
Yeah. The hybrid gets bishoped by the drone, and somebody's head gets cut off. I think it's the guy, one of the maintenance guys.
Yeah, might have been like, I don't know, Walker or whatever his name was. I don't remember.
Walker, I believe it is Walker. Right as Bishop shows up to close or to open the gate doors.
Yeah, and to let them get out, because like they I don't remember, like, they, like, must have, like, see, this part I'm a little hazy on. Maybe they, like, found a different shuttle, or I don't remember why they had to open the doors, but they were going to open the doors and get out somehow using something that I don't remember what it was.
I'm looking at the comic book pages, and they are on a shuttle, but we did see them chuck some grenades into it, or what looked like grenades. I don't know. Maybe they were just bug bombs just to kill the stuff that was in there.
Maybe there was a second shuttle. Who knows?
There must have been a second shuttle. It's the only thing that... yeah, there is, because they open another bay door, and there is another shuttle that the drone was on top of. So, yes, there is a second shuttle.
And so, yeah, they get on the shuttle, and the doors aren't opening, and then Bishop shows up at the last second, manages to open the door, and he hops on as they peel out of the station, finally.
Right. They're trying to peel out of the station, and the drone is still there. But as the docking bay opens, we see the drop ship from the UPP station. The survivor in there opens fire on the drone and blows it away.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
like
rad.
A minigun attached to its ship or something like that.
She says, "Die, motherfucker," as she fires away. We then cut to a little bit later, where all of the survivors are together on the dropship. So it is the survivor from the UPP. It is Bishop, Hicks, and Spence. Those are the only survivors.
Yeah, sure are.
And they're making their way towards the Kansas City to dock, as Bishop and Hicks are having a conversation about how the survivor is dying from radiation poisoning. The UPP survivor. And there's nothing they can do about it. But Bishop is like, Hicks is like, is there anything we can do? And Bishop gives him this whole speech about how you can be a species again. You can be united against a common enemy. You've been at war with each other for so long, presumably the Colonial Marines and the UPP. And it's time to put that aside and go to war against the Xenomorphs, find where they came from, and wipe them out like an alien's outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've seen the enemy, and she isn't it, and neither are you, right?
Yep.
End of screenplay.
Yeah, that's how the story basically ends. So,
not going to rush you through this, obviously, but let's talk. If you've got any like important highlights, differences in the stories, in the script versions, I am anxious to hear them.
All right. I will start this off by saying that of the 4 versions that I took in, the script and the novelization of the first draft,
yes,
and the audio drama and the comic book of the second draft, the novelization of the first draft was my favorite one of the 4.
Okay.
But I think I like draft 2 overall, like conceptually, more than I like draft 1.
Okay.
Because draft 1 was basically intended to be Aliens 2.
Right.
It's Hicks and Bishop teaming up to fight a big, huge, giant swarm of xenomorphs along with some hybrids in a big space station.
Yes.
When he wrote draft 2, he pared that down way, way hard and cut it down to, I think, 3 hybrids and 1 xenomorph, and turned it into Alien 2.
Right.
It wasn't really an action horror story. It was more of a straight horror story.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because there are only, I mean, there's 2 full xenomorphs, right? Because there's the one on the Rodina and then the one.
Yes, of course. Yes. I forgot about the one on the Rodina. Yes. But yeah, like the first draft was intended to be similar in tone to the second movie. The second draft was intended to be more similar in tone to the first movie. So I like the second draft more, but of all of the versions I read, the novelization of the first draft was my favorite one.
Okay, just in terms of like the way the story was told, because
yes, correct.
Obviously, you read a screenplay. Screenplays, they're not bare bones, but they're not written like, they're not written like novels, right? So
yeah,
you don't have as much detail and everything. I do want to say, in the opening to the graphic novel version, William Gibson does talk about what he was doing and how big of a fan he was of the first 2 movies, and how he really thought about making his screenplay feel like the third side of the triangle, you know?
Yeah.
And I do think, being mostly familiar with just the second draft, I do think the second draft succeeds in that, because you get pieces of aliens, but you get them put in a setting that is a lot more similar to the original Alien.
Yeah.
You see like a different side of the military with like all the bureaucracy and the civil or the Cold War stuff, but you also still have like another side of Weyland-Yutani. Like you get to see the scientists and like really hear about the intent that they have with the Xenomorph.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's setting out to be a third piece of this trilogy. I do think that second draft is pretty successful, but I'll let you continue on with your notes.
The first thing that I have noticed, like I have in my notes, is that Halliday as a character is completely different in the first draft.
Okay.
Halliday in draft 1 is a character introduced like near the end of the story when Hicks and Spence and Jackson are like, let's get together all the survivors and head to that dropship. Like, 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through the story.
Right.
Like that is when Halliday shows up for the first time. And
yeah,
Halliday is not one of the survivors, so of course she gets killed at one point.
yes.
But Halliday's entire role in draft 1, literally the only thing she does is just cry.
Wow.
The
okay.
entire time, nonstop, 24/7. Literally the only thing she ever does in the story is just cry and wail and scream in despair.
Oh, geez.
That's it. That is literally the only thing she ever does. And then she gets killed off screen by a xenomorph. We never even see it happen.
So she's kind of like the Lambert, right? She's kind of like Veronica Cartwright's character, who is just yeah.
She doesn't really do a whole lot. She cries a bunch and then she gets killed off screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. There is a scene where Tully's death is different in draft 1. They still have the scene of Spence going to his room and like finding the red contamination strip and going, oh no, we have to find him.
Right.
And they find him by, rather than him leaving a message saying where he's going, in this one they pull the aliens move of like tracking his implanted chip.
Okay.
And it leads them to this like semi-abandoned, like partially constructed area of the station where they find like, his discarded bloody clothes. And then they look up on like a big like rack or box or whatever. And he's already there, having turned into a hybrid. And he jumps down and there's like an action scene between hybrid Tully, Hicks, and the driver that came with him, who's he got sent this group of Marines along with him, and all 5 of the Marines other than Hicks get immediately murdered by this thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, in draft 2 there weren't really any other Marines present at all. Which, I mean, just Hicks and arguably Bishop.
And so yeah, there's an action scene where Tully is still found alive. They fight him off. And then Hicks drives away, but I'm pretty sure does not kill hybrid Tully before he drives away. I don't remember if Tully ever comes back or not, but I seem to recall he just drives away. He doesn't actually kill him, because like the whole thing of like, oh, how they don't have guns,
right,
that doesn't exist in the first draft. Like he has like a big pulse rifle and everything.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I believe the way it works is in draft 1, I believe Rossetti is not former Marines. I believe he's still a member of the Colonial Marines.
Gotcha.
I think.
So that's another thing, the no weapons thing. I understand he gets a gun, right? Like a gun.
Yeah,
suit.
he does.
But
he's given a gun. Yeah.
That's obviously a thing that makes it more like the original Alien, not having the weapons, but also something that makes made it into the theatrical, into the Alien 3 that we got, right?
Yep.
Not having adequate weaponry. I think it's a fun idea. I'm okay with them not having guns in this, you know?
Yeah, there's, like I said, there's a group of 5 Marines. I don't remember what their names are because they're literally only in that one scene, and they're with Hicks when he goes to track down Tully. Tully turns out to be a hybrid and kills everyone but Hicks, and then Hicks escapes.
Okay.
And then there is a scene of, I believe it's Walker, I think, after like the evacuation and everything's getting deserted and stuff, he goes down to like the mall style concourse down there.
Okay.
And because, I forgot to mention, there's a scene earlier where Hicks gets a job. He's like, given a job, basically, like they even say he's just like given something to do to just like keep him out of everyone's hair, pretty much.
Every time he ends a shift, he's like, who do I debrief to? Who do I debrief to about my ship? Why haven't I been debriefed about my shift yet?
The thing of it is there's a couple of scenes where after he gets off work, he goes down to the mall concourse and goes to this like bar nearby, and he'll like, order drinks, and he happens to run into Tully there. And this is before Tully gets mutated.
Gotcha.
And this is how he gets brought into the plan to like kill the cloned xenomorphs, because Tully's like, oh, you're like the Marine they brought off the Sulaco, huh? And he's all like, yeah, what's it to you? And he's like, I was on the Sulaco too. And like Hicks pieces together that he's like, oh, he was like the boarding party that rescued him while he was unconscious. And then he's like, Tully makes some kind of like veiled comment about like what happened on there, and then Hicks pieces together, oh shit, he's trying to say there was a fucking xenomorph on the ship. Oh no. And so he basically forces the information out of Tully, who Tully's like, we can't talk about it here, meet me later at this specific spot. And then he goes there and there's like 4 or 5 people, and they're like, we're gonna go destroy those embryos, and like that's how he gets roped in draft 1.
Yeah, that
but
makes
anyway,
a lot of sense.
But anyway, the reason I bring this up is because there's a scene where I think it's Walker, but I'm not sure, goes to the concourse and goes like to the bar that we've seen Hicks going to earlier. And he basically goes in there, grabs a free drink. He's basically just trying to get away from everyone for a moment. So he goes there, grabs a drink, he's doing all this stuff. And then a hybrid shows up. And he's like got his weapon there with him, and he goes to pull it on the hybrid, but the hybrid gets the drop on him and kills him. And so that's like another like additional action scene they worked into the movie. And then later on, Hicks by himself passes by. Oh, because that was one part I forgot. The way he manages to kill it is because he sees the hybrid coming at him, and then he hits a button on this like little mechanical thing around his neck, and then one of the power loaders crashes through the wall and pins the hybrid down and then beats it to death with one of its claws.
So I like that. That should have been in the comic book version.
And I don't I believe that scene just straight got removed from the second draft.
Right.
But like that character ends up dying during that scene, but I can't actually remember how off the top of my head, but he does end up getting killed because Hicks goes to the concourse later and passes by the bar and notices that the wall got burst through, and he's like, huh, what's up with that? But doesn't stop to investigate.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
And later on, during the book or during the story, I'm trying to remember the character's name, Spence. Spence gets separated from the rest of the group, and is because like I said, this is the point where they're climbing up the ladder on the inside of an elevator shaft, and there's like openings to the various floors as they pass through, and they come to this area that has like a catwalk connecting two platforms.
Okay.
And I don't remember how, but somehow she gets separated from the rest of the group, and a hybrid shows up and is like chasing her, and she climbs up a ladder to get away from it, but like the hatch at the top of the ladder turns out to be locked.
Right.
And so she's like about to get killed by this thing, and she reaches out to like the box near, like attached to the wall, and opens it up, and turns out there's a flare gun in it. And so she pulls out the flare gun and shoots the hybrid with it.
Yeah.
And like the flare impales itself into the hybrid's chest.
I read
and
this
then
part, yeah.
melts and partially explodes the thing.
Yeah, that's dope. I read that. I remember reading about that.
And this is relevant because, she accidentally wandered off by herself, and then Jackson and Hicks go to find her, and like Holloway is there by herself. Well, she's not actually there by herself, because according to this point in the book, Tatsumi is also there, but Tatsumi is just not mentioned at all during this scene. So I don't know if they like forgot about him or what, but Halliday's there. And then Hicks and Jackson go to find and bring back Spence. And then when they come back, they find the teddy bear that Halliday was carrying, like lying on the floor by itself, covered in alien slime. And they're like, oh no, she got taken. And that's like never explained or followed up on, but we don't ever see her again. So
Yeah, who cares?
yeah, that's how Halliday got killed. And, but there is a scene where I can't remember exactly why, but long story short, the only way to get to the docking bay is they have to go on the outside of the ship.
That would have been fucking cool. That's something that's like in Infestation.
It is. And I do remember how they're getting chased, and they end up because Rossetti is still with them, but like Rossetti has like kind of like a every man for himself, like death drive, where like every time they're going to somewhere where they need to go, it's like, oh, I have the codes for this. So he runs ahead to go open the door and then try and close it behind him before everyone else can get through.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that a couple of times before they basically multiple times like threaten him with a gun and all that. And he eventually gets killed, and they're running away from that. And they run into this office, and the office is like a one-way trip. There's no other way out other than the door they came through. And there's like aliens busting down the door from the other side. And they're like, how the fuck are we going to get out of here? And, it turns out that they're in the office of one of the science lab technicians, a woman by the name of Trent, who had been brought up earlier on in the story, but didn't do anything relevant, which is why right now is the first time I'm bringing her up.
Okay.
And she had gotten locked in the room and shot herself.
Gotcha.
And so her corpse is like there in the desk.
And it
so
becomes
they
a
move the desk.
hybrid. I don't know.
And they move the desk, and they're, move her body, and they're trying to figure out a way out. And they discover that the back wall of her office is the inside door of an airlock. So they break open the airlock, and they're like, we can't get out that door. This is the only other way out. So our only option to get to the docking bay is to crawl on the outside of the ship. And so they go in there, and there are 5 suits, but there's still 6 of them that are left. There are 6 of them that are left, because I forgot Rossetti has not died yet. This is the scene where Rossetti dies, because because they're like, there's 5 suits, but there's 6 of us. What are we going to do? And then this is the part where Tatsumi starts turning into a hybrid.
Okay.
And then Tatsumi attacks Rossetti and kills him, and then both of them get blown out of the airlock. And then now that it's open, the 4 of them that are left go around and crawl outside, And while they're out there, they get chased by xenomorphs, not hybrids, but actual xenomorphs.
Okay.
And this is when we find out in this story that xenomorphs can survive in a vacuum.
Sure.
And they're getting chased by a couple of xenomorphs, and Hicks still has his pulse rifle, so he's like, shooting at him, taking pot shots at him, killing most of them. Good shot, And they basically, the spaceship equivalent of crest a hill,
Okay.
They're like going along the outside of the wall, and they get to, a part of the spaceship that they couldn't see from where they started, and they come around, and there's just like dozens and dozens and dozens of xenomorphs.
Holy smokes.
Just like a huge gigantic swarm of 50, 80, 100 of them.
Jeez.
And
yeah, that's
they're
very
all
different.
they're all just kind of standing there staring at each other. Like the xenomorphs are just like standing there, not really doing anything. And the reveal of what happens here is going to kind of be cut. Like the the dramaticness of it is going to kind of be cut a little, because I just realized there is an earlier part that I also forgot to mention.
Okay.
There is a scene where we cut back to Hicks. Or sorry, not Hicks, Bishop. We cut back to Bishop.
Okay.
And he's making his way towards the docking bay, and he has to go through the mall concourse while he does it.
Sure.
And he sees a bunch of xenomorphs hanging around looking for people, but he's like manages to like stay away from him and hide and all that. And he like looks up at the second floor of the concourse, and there's a fucking queen just standing there.
Woof. Do you think that this is what if this is the queen? I'm sure you have an actual answer for it, but if I was writing this screenplay, this would be the queen that got shot out of the Sulaco airlock in Aliens and has just been floating around in space for 4 years until it just happened to wind up at Anchor Point still alive because they can survive in a vacuum.
Well, I will say that when Bishop sees this queen, she's like, how should I say this? She's like stuck to the wall via alien resin.
Okay.
She's like, connected, attached to the wall, like how they do with people that are like kept for cocooning purposes.
Sure.
That queen is the same way. She's kind of like stuck in there, but her head is still active and can move around.
Gnarly.
And so he like sees the queen and goes, oh shit, and then hightails it out of there. And then we never see the queen again until this group of people is on the outside of the ship, and there's like all these dozens and dozens of xenomorphs, and the crowd of xenomorphs literally splits, and the queen walks up to the head of the group.
Okay.
And Hicks is like, oh no, because he looks down at his pulse rifle and he has like 9 shots left, and he's like, ruh-roh. And while he's doing that, because this all happens, they've managed to make it to the airlock at the docking bay they were trying to get to, but they haven't entered it yet. And that's when like the queen and all the xenomorphs show up, and Hicks is like, ruh-roh, all right, let's just do this. And so he like plants his feet and starts taking his shots, and he's like, killing all these xenomorphs. And then right behind him, the airlock opens up.
Okay.
And they panic because Rossetti comes out of it.
Okay. Oh.
But as it turns out, it's not Rossetti. The reason they think it's Rossetti is because the person in the suit is wearing the same color helmet that Rossetti had on, yellow. And so they saw a yellow helmet come out, and they're like, oh no, he's back. And Hicks goes to turn and shoot him when he realizes it's actually Bishop.
Ah.
And Bishop, by this point, his leg had already snapped, and he like tied it, like he splinted it in place with a piece of metal he pulled out of a broken elevator.
Smart.
Because when he was escaping the mall, the queen broke out and tried to kill him in the elevator, but he managed to avoid it and get out of the way while the queen was still there attacking. And then when he comes through the place later, the queen's not there, and he's like, I hope that's not a problem. But he manages to make it to the airlock, and he opens it up and lets them through. And right around this time is when Jackson gets killed.
Okay.
And so at this point, the only people that are left are the 3 survivors, Bishop, Spence, and Hicks. And the 3 of them managed to get inside of the ship and actually, no, sorry, I was wrong. They managed to get inside of the ship in the second draft. In the first draft, they do not. Bishop manages to save them, but they're not able to get back in because I think like the swarm is too bad or something. So rather than going into the airlock, they climb out onto the end of this big radio tower and just kind of cling onto the end. And like Bishop's like using his last few remaining rounds to like take out any xenomorph that like starts crawling up the tower. And they're like, well, folks, we're fucked. What are we going to do? And then just then, the Rodina station survivor swoops in and pulls out the big minigun and just fires all of the, like, kills all the xenomorphs gathering around the end of the radio tower.
Nice.
And then opens up the hatch on the back and scoops them up, and then they fly away. And the rest of it, the ending is the same.
Okay.
Like, turns out she does still have radiation poisoning, and Bishop gives the whole speech about like how, remember what happens in Outbreak, you should do that same thing but in a canon movie. Oh wait, whoops. You know, the ending of it's basically the same, except the Kansas City, as far as I can recall, never shows up.
Okay. I just want to say the survivor of the Rodina, her name is Cheng.
Cheng, okay.
Yeah, I apologize for not being able to pull that sooner. I think she got name dropped maybe on like page 1, and that was it. But,
yeah, they never really use her name. So
yeah. So I apologize for glossing over that or missing it as we were having this discussion. You know, we've been trying to get this episode in the works for a couple weeks now, and various scheduled things have thrown it off. So like we're a little rusty, and that's okay.
But yeah, like I said, the basic gist of the first draft of the story is imagine the stuff from the second draft, but there's a lot more xenomorphs, and there's several more action scenes, and a queen shows up. But it's basically the same thing, pretty much.
So, I hear what you're saying about the novel being your favorite version of this, but the second draft being the better draft in your opinion, or the preferred draft in your opinion.
Yes.
I'm with you on that now, having heard some of the differences. Like the novel sounds, I'm sure the novel was a better experience to read, because I feel like the comic rushed through some things. The audio drama, as they do, had to like take some liberties with how they told the story, because it's an audio medium, right? So you had to do a lot more narrating of events, and maybe certain things you just didn't get a good sense of. I just didn't get a good sense of them because of the medium. Right.
Speaking of stuff getting cut, I remembered one other scene that I had forgotten about.
Sure.
In the second draft, how you said that what was it? Halliday went and took care of the lemurs or whatever.
Yeah, she went to the eco pod.
In the first draft, Spence does all that stuff because, like I said, Halliday doesn't show up until way later in the story.
Right.
And there is a scene where she goes there to like take care of the lemurs and like feed them one last time before they leave. And she gets there and finds all of them cocooned to the trees, and then some of them break out, and they're like little miniature lemur-sized, like half lemur, half xenomorphs.
That's badass.
And she gets attacked by some of them, and she's like, ah! And she like runs away and locks them in the room. So that's the only time we ever see them.
Okay.
But I forgot that does happen at one point.
Halliday does see some of them cocooned up in that scene, so like they kept a part of that anyway for the comic book adaptation. I'm not sure about the audio drama. I don't think that happened in it. I will say, like, I'm not crazy about either the audio drama or the comic book for telling this story. I think the comic book does a slightly better job because you get the visual, of the things. You get to see what the hybrids really look like. You get a better sense of the characters, in my opinion. But what's strange is, so have you ever read like the comic book adaptation of Batman Returns, for instance?
I have not.
Or
no.
something along those lines. Like that's the touchstone for me of like when they used to put movies out and then they would do a comic book adaptation of the movie. And those were a lot of my comics that I read as a kid. Like, you just like, comic book adaptations of movies. And they are serviceable, right? They tell the story. You get the entire story in them, but you are reading a comic book adaptation of a movie. And that just doesn't always work well for me when you're translating a movie into a comic book form. I don't think it doesn't allow you to like, it doesn't, they never feel as cinematic as watching a movie. Right. But they also don't feel as like, they also don't do the things that comic books do that I find so interesting for the medium. Cause they're just adapting another form of media. Right.
Yeah, they're not telling their own story. Yeah, exactly.
Or they're not telling the story in the way you would tell a story in a comic book. They're trying to tell a movie story in a comic book. And that's the sense I got of this. Even though the movie didn't get made, it did feel like someone was like they were just adapting a screenplay, and I don't think it was super successful. I think certain things got rushed over. I think there was a sense of tension that it was lacking,
Yeah, I'm going to go on record right now. The comic book is 5 issues. The first, let's just say that the movie would have been an hour and a half long if they had made the script into a movie.
Yeah.
Let's just say that for an example. The comic, the first 3 issues tells the first, hour and 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
And then everything happens in the last 2 issues, which was the same problem that I had with the audio drama. The audio drama is 210, 215, right around there. It's only just a little over 2 hours long. But honestly, dude, I thought it was insanely boring because I got so bored for the first half of the story, and it didn't start to pick up until over halfway through. It was the same thing with the comic. The first 3 issues were just so boring. The first appearance of the hybrid when Wells turns into it, which is that happens in issue 4 of the comic. Okay. And that's maybe halfway through the story. And it's the comic doesn't really feel very well paced. And it's 3 issues of almost nothing happens. And then 2 issues where everything happens. Right. And the audio drama was the same way. The first half was just really boring. And then the last half was good, but it's only 2 hours long. And going back to what you originally said, I read the script, I read the novelization, which is the events of the script, but since it's a novel, it can be as long as it wants.
Right. Yeah.
And it's now knowing what happened in draft 1, I really wish they had made a straight novelization of the draft 2 script.
Yeah. Because
all we're getting is truncated and what's the word? Lesser quality versions of the story. Because I like draft 2 better as a script, but both of the adaptations of it are not good.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the Alien original screenplay graphic novel got it right.
Yeah.
This needed another issue. This did need an issue 6, right? We needed a little, because some of those action scenes, they just felt rushed. There was a confusing section where I was why? Okay, who is this and why is he destroying the computer? And we're cutting back and forth. We're cutting to multiple scenes and multiple characters doing different things on single pages because they're just trying to get all the information in there. It needed it needed
the comic issue. Also does the same thing that original screenplay and 1 or 2 of the other comics also did. They don't tell you everyone's name often enough,
right?
So half the time you don't know who character X actually is.
As you heard me stumble over names this entire recording,
yeah,
I think that the answer is we should have just gotten a filmed version of the second draft. I think that would have been the best way, because that's how this story was intended to be told, right? don't get me wrong. I think it's insanely cool that you can read a comic book based on this screenplay and a novel based on this screenplay. Like, I think it is awesome that those things exist. The audio drama too. Like, it's cool that you can listen to it, and like that's about 2 hours and 10 minutes. That's probably about as long as the movie would have been.
Yeah.
So like we get a version of this. I'm glad that there's a version of this story, this interesting story, because I do like the story overall. I do think it would have been a cool sequel to Aliens. I think it's awesome that we can that this got media adaptations and got publicly released so people could enjoy it. I just don't think that any of either of the adaptations that I checked out were successful. It sounds like the novel was pretty successful, but the action-oriented story isn't really your cup of tea.
Yeah.
And a novel adaptation of Second Draft might have really hit the spot for you.
I mean, this is how I'm going to put it. Anyone out there, any of the listeners out there, and hell, even you, Neal, if you're interested in getting in on this, my recommendation is to read or listen to the novelization of the first draft script.
Okay, so like the full audio book.
And then read the second draft script, because you can find that online easily.
Okay.
And you can find that, but like from my research, it's funny to me that we decided to, do the novelization and the actual script of the first draft, because based on my research, the second draft script is the more famous and well-known of the two drafts.
Yeah. Well, it had two, what we're going to do, 3 adaptations or
True.
2 adaptations and the script of that one, so.
But yeah, like my suggestion is read the novelization of the first draft because the novelization is there and it's like complete and tells a complete story. And the story is restructured to be designed to work as a novel,
Right.
And then read the second draft script and just imagine it in your head, because reading the script and picturing it in your mind will probably be more satisfying than listening to the audio drama or reading the comic book.
Yeah. I think the comic book is still fun to read if you want to check that out. If you didn't pick up the Dark Horse release, the comic book is included in Aliens, the Original Years, Volume 4.
Mm-hmm.
That fat collection, which just released in March of this year, 2023. So it's available if you want to check it out. And I think it's an okay read, but I don't think. Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying, Kenny.
I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to the audio drama or read the comic. It's just whatever you imagine in your head from reading the script, you'll probably end up finding more satisfying of an adaptation than these stories. But absolutely go read them, because the hybrids, they look great. Like the drawings of them look fucking cool as hell.
Yeah,
the panel of Wells pulling the skin off of her face
that's wild.
Is so cool. And the cover of issue 4 is basically that, but redrawn to be a cover. And I literally wrote in my notes, the cover of issue 4 is an absolute masterpiece. I literally wrote that in my notes.
That red background with the skin coming off and the xenomorph underneath.
It looks real cool, and I do like it. Like I said, it's not like I don't like the comic. It's just I would have rather had a novelization of the second draft,
right,
if I got the choice,
Yeah, I think if the comic had one more issue, so it didn't have to rush through the last 2, because that whole landing bay, the whole landing bay scene was just a mess and hard to follow, and it just needed a little bit more breathing room. Overall, I think the comic is good, and the Dark Horse trade version has some really good pinup art in the back, including a piece of one of them that was it was a Comic Book Shop Day variant cover by James Stokoe, who's a great artist I talk about a lot. Also, some artwork by another comic artist and writer I love, Brandon Graham. He has a little pinup piece in here as well.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I think and I think the comic itself looks good. The art looks very, very good. It just, I think 5 issues didn't serve the story.
Yeah,
you know?
it's just it's not paced very well. Like you said, it probably really did need a 6th issue, and that
Right.
probably would have solved a lot of the problems. But yeah, I just want to be clear. The art is not something I'm complaining about the comic.
Right.
It's like the writing generally, but the pacing specifically is the problem I have with the comic.
So I am not, I'm not taking shots at Johnnie Christmas here. I think he did a great job. I think that we just needed one more. We just needed one more issue.
And also, going back to something you were saying earlier that I meant to touch on, but got caught up talking about something else and forgot.
Yes.
When you compare them as far as pure adaptations is concerned, the novel feels like a full and complete work. It tells the whole story and gives you all the information.
Right.
The audio drama and the comic book both feel like they have pieces missing.
Yeah.
Like even if you don't know what was supposed to have been there, it just some parts of it feel like, glossed over or rushed, or it feels like there's a part missing here somewhere.
Right.
And it's like the novelization does not feel like that, which is ironic because the first draft screenplay you find online has several pages missing from it.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
But the book somehow still feels like a full and complete work that's not missing anything in a way that the drama and the comic book do not feel.
Okay, so outside of the specific medium, should anyone... No, that's not how I want to ask this. How do you feel about this as a sequel to Aliens? Or more specifically, I guess, would you have preferred something like this over what we got for Alien 3?
Man, I don't know, because as listeners of last week's episode can confirm, I actually really like Alien 3 a lot.
Yeah, Alien 3 really worked for me on that watch through as well.
And I mean, I'm honestly not sure because it just does things so differently. A part of me is finding it kind of hard to compare them. I will say this though. As much as I like Alien 3, you can tell, the movie Alien 3, the one we got.
Right.
As much as I like it, you can tell it is a compromised work.
Yes.
The William Gibson script, feels like it had a strong hand, a strong creator with a real vision that knew what he was trying to do and told the story he was envisioning in his head.
100%. Yeah.
And which one of those I prefer? I mean, it's kind of hard to say just because if they had made a movie of the Gibson 3, I would be able to compare them. But, it's one of those things where in this kind of situation, the medium that the story is told in really does make a difference because the second draft, the adaptations of it that we got, those adaptations weren't great. So based on that, would I have preferred that? Because if they had made the movie, they would have made it based off of the second draft.
Yeah.
Based on the adaptations of draft 2, would I have liked that? Maybe not, because the adaptations weren't great.
So I used Batman Returns as an example earlier because that movie fucking rules. I'm one of those people who likes Batman Returns. The comic book adaptation I read as a kid, not super great. I think that if
it stinks,
it doesn't stink, but it's not as good as watching the movie. And that was kind of the whole point. We're dealing with adaptations on this thing, but I think if this movie had been able to be made as a movie, I think I might have preferred it. And not for just the chicken shit reasons of Newt has a happy ending, right? And Ripley sort of gets away from the Xenomorph for once. It does feel more like Alien 3, David Fincher's Alien 3, for lack of a better term, since he sort of disowned the franchise, disowned the movie.
Yeah.
Feels like a huge departure from part 1 and 2. And I understand that it's trying to do Alien again, but it's a different corner of the universe. It's a different world. It doesn't feel like either of the two movies that come before it. And that works for it. That's one of the reasons I enjoyed it, rewatching it for the podcast. But this does feel like a natural extension of what came before it to me.
That is what I was going to say. Ultimately, now that we've been talking it out a little bit, I've processed it a little bit more in my brain. I think ultimately I would rather have seen this version as a movie rather than the version of 3 that we got, because you just kind of hit on it. This movie, like the William Gibson script for Alien 3, was intended to be, as you said, the third point of the triangle.
Right.
It was intended from the very beginning to be, this is the natural progression of what came before.
Yeah.
Whereas the version of Alien 3 that we got made into a movie, like I said earlier, is a compromised version where they started it out and went, all right, well, we're going to do this, then we're going to change this, then we're going to do all these other changes to it. And it's like, it was like, it was whittled down and turned into something other than what it was originally supposed to be.
Right.
And this is what it was originally supposed to be, you know?
Not only, but this also wraps up. So it doesn't give Ripley a great wrap up, but like, we understand that she's going to be fine. And they were sort of not handcuffed. They couldn't use the character. They didn't know if they could get Ellen back, or they didn't know if they could get Sigourney Weaver back, etc. So like, they didn't focus the story on Ripley, which is okay. We pick up with these other characters from the previous sequel. Mm-hmm. But the big thing that this does is we finally see the company get their hands on the Xenomorph that they've been trying to do for the previous 2 movies, and we get to see how bad that shit goes, and we get to see like the intended use of the thing, of hybridizing it with like human DNA, albeit accidentally, and just how terribly that goes. Like, we get the next step of the company's plan, right? They finally get a Xenomorph, and then once they do, we see them go, oh no, this was a mistake. Right. Yeah. So it just, and again, I really enjoyed watching Alien 3 last time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I really do like Alien 3 a lot, and so it's hard for me to disconnect myself from that. But now that we've talked about it, and I've been able to talk through it out loud on the episode, I've finally come to the realization that, I think I probably would have preferred this version, just because this is like the pure version of the story,
Now, here's a pitch for you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
What if we are... we're on the Sulaco, right?
All right. I got my eyes closed. I'm envisioning a worldscape in front of me.
UPP Airspace, okay?
Mm-hmm.
UPP boards the ship, right?
All right, love it.
Facehugger pops out, just like it does in this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Guy absolutely loses his shit, starts firing all over the place, right? Starts the fire. Ellen Ripley's pod is the only one compromised. She is loaded automatically into the evac, just her. Mm-hmm. And launched down to Fiorina 161. As the Sulaco, I might have said Nostromo earlier, you all know what I mean, as the Sulaco exits UPP airspace and docks with Anchor Point.
And continues to tell this story.
Hicks and Newt on Anchor Point having this happen. Ripley down on Fury 161 having that movie happen. They're both happening at the same fucking time. Right?
Yeah.
That's the legacy sequel we need for Aliens.
Because it wouldn't really require that much tweaking. Like, all we would have to do is remove the scenes at the beginning of the movie where she finds them dead.
Right.
Well, I suppose Bishop would also have to be cut out of the movie. So the first, 40 minutes of the movie would have to be edited down. And then in the Gibson version, we just cut out all the stuff that has Ripley in it, which is easy because she's only in 2 scenes of the story. Sure.
We can still have a face hugger or something get down to the planet with her and getting the dog or the ox, whichever version you want. So maybe we are, what am I trying to say here? Bishop is carrying face huggers as opposed to embryos or ovomorphs or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how one can get down to Fury 161 and one can still get on Kurtz. It's possible. Yeah. Maybe that'd be my preferred version. We get both of them that way, right?
Oh, I would love to have both of them. That would be the way I would want to do it.
We get both of them and Newt lives.
Speaking of a chest burster bursting out of someone, I forgot in draft 1, there is a scene where someone, I don't remember who it is, maybe it's Tatsumi, I don't remember what character it is. No, it wouldn't have been Tatsumi, I don't remember who it is. But somebody dies via a chest burster coming out of them, but get this, his chest blows open and 6 of them come out.
Criminy, that's fucking gnarly.
Yeah, and like Tatsumi, when he dies, like, you know how earlier on how you mentioned he got bitten and his leg gets wrapped up, and like his leg starts like leaking yellow pus rather than blood. Later on, when he dies, Burster comes out of the wound in his leg. Jesus. And then while he's writhing around from that, his chest busts open and 2 chest bursters come out of his torso.
So the idea in this is these hybrids are just passing on the little bits of genetic material that are then each cell of those is like developing into a chest burster.
It kind of works the way it does in Covenant, where what are they called, like blood bursters or whatever, where they just kind of pop out of wherever. Like, you know, like I said, 1 pops out of Tatsumi's leg wound and 2 out of his chest. Some guy gets 6 out of his chest. Someone else, a burster comes out of his mouth.
Jeez.
Like it comes up his throat and pops out of his face. Yeah, so like in this one, they don't only ever come out of the chest. Of course, presumably the whole reason they're in the chest in the first place is because that's where there's like the most area for them to survive. Right. So if they grow fast enough and stay small enough until they bust out, I guess they could pretty much stay anywhere. They don't need to be like biologically bound to the chest or whatever.
It does seem like the final mutation in this is very rapid, right? It goes from nothing to like suddenly. Because like when the hybrids became hybrids, they were much larger, obviously in size than when they were humans. So like as they explode out of the person, they're actively growing, and which is what's causing them to burst out.
Yeah, they're totally fine until one time they're not. And then over the course of like 2 minutes, they go from, oh man, I don't feel good, to I am ripping my own skin off.
I'm a completely different creature beneath this skin.
Let me ask you one last question that you'll probably know where I'm going with this as soon as I bring it up. Have you ever seen the first live action Silent Hill movie?
No, I have not seen the first live action Silent Hill movie. Sorry.
Okay. Near the climax of the movie, everyone's like gathering around like the church or wherever it is in the plot that they're at. And all the main characters are like in or going to the church, but like, you know, the church, because it's Silent Hill, has like this big like cult in it that all the people are part of, and they're like doing this ritual or whatever. And because it's a Silent Hill movie, Pyramid Head is in it.
Sure, I'm familiar.
And I think actually in the second movie, there's even 2 Pyramid Heads, but that's beside the point. In this one, Pyramid Head is in it. He's kind of like traipsing around and stuff. And I think he's attempting to prevent people from getting into the church or something like that. I might be remembering wrong. It's been years since I've seen it, but this is why I'm bringing it up. Okay. There is a scene where Pyramid Head attacks someone, and he's like this big, like 8-foot tall guy, has like a gigantic, like, you know, cloud strife buster sword, you know, and he's like massive rippling muscle, and he lunges towards this person and grabs them to prevent them from doing whatever it was they were doing. And then there is a scene where he lifts them up with one hand and then uses his other hand and grabs the top of their head, and then in one fell swoop pulls all of their skin off.
Yo, that's gnarly.
He just grabs him and just swoop, in one fell swoop, pulls off all of their skin in one movement. And every single time a hybrid revealed itself, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, he's pyramid heading them. I actually have in my notes, I wrote, they Silent Hilled themselves, because I call it Silent Hilling when someone gets all of their skin ripped off. Sure. And so I literally wrote in my notes, oh, the hybrid Silent Hilled itself. And that's how we found out what it was.
And then when someone gets bisected, we call them evil. They get evil deaded. And
That's
then,
right. When they get bisected vertically, they get evil deaded. When they get bisected horizontally, they get either aliensed or bishoped. And when you get your skin ripped off, you get Silent Hilled.
Get Silent Hilled, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we got, and then when you get your head, your skull and spine ripped out, you get Sub-Zero'd.
That is also correct.
Even though that's a Predator thing first, we still call it Sub-Zero'd.
Also, as you may have noticed, we came across something else this weekend that Sub-Zero'd somebody.
We did.
I don't know if we want to talk about that on this episode or not, but
oh, we're talking about Dead Alive, right?
We are, yes.
Yeah.
We watched Dead Alive in preparation for guesting on another show that they ultimately decided to not do. So we just watched Dead Alive for the fun of it.
Just hadn't seen it in a while, decided to watch it.
Yeah.
And yeah, somebody absolutely gets Sub-Zero'd in that, don't they? Boy.
Not all the way. It doesn't get removed completely, but yes.
Yeah, they get like a 75% Sub-Zero.
Mm-hmm.
So then also, that's the other thing, when people get blended up with a lawnmower, we call that getting brain deaded.
That is correct.
Which is the other title of Dead Alive.
Good times.
We should get out of here, Kenny. Where can people find you online?
Any social media site that you feel like looking for me on, give it a try to see if I'm on there. My handle is CYHOBBEZ. I may be on there. I may not be, but if I am, that's definitely my handle because I use it for everything.
There you go. I am on Twitter at Final Neal and Instagram at Final Neal Retro and twitch.tv/Final Neal. And that is Neal with an A. I've been streaming some Fireteam lately. Kenny joins me in Fireteam and joins the stream via voice. So follow me over there. Catch some of our Fireteam streams and other things. I plan on streaming some Alien Trilogy as well. We'll see if I can we'll see if I can have the guts to stream Alien Isolation. Gonna do some Alien streams over there and some non-Alien streams too. So twitch.tv/Final Neal. Again, Neal with an A. Kenny, where can people find? I do a Mortal Kombat show. mkpodquest.com, whatever. Kenny, where can people find this show on the internet?
I can see how proud you are of that other show. Good work.
We've just been going on long enough.
We've been going for a while. Yes,
I got laundry to do.
We're currently at 3 hours pre-edit, so let's see how long it comes out when we're done.
Yeah.
So our website is crewexpendable.net. If you want to send us an email, you can email us at mother@crewexpendable.net. Our Twitter handle is @crewexpendapod, and our Instagram handle is @crewexpendablepod.
And our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@crewexpendable.
I will have to start remembering to toss that one in there too. Yes.
Yeah, it's it's the podcast on YouTube. That's basically what it is. But I'll probably upload some of those Fireteam streams, archive them on our YouTube page because Twitch doesn't archive things forever. So yeah, check it out. Next episode, I think we're gonna knock out Archie versus Predator issue 4 because I've got some traveling to do and it's just gonna mess my schedule up. So
we're going to do that and do a little wrap up about the series as a whole. Spoiler alert, we're probably going to think it is very good, but I guess we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, so check out our Archie versus Predator episodes in our archive if you haven't yet. And until next time, stay frosty.